Hi everyone, welcome to Cartoonology. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to show you that SpongeBob SquarePants is one of the most carefully crafted shows in animation history, filled with hidden details that reveal the incredible creativity and intelligence of its creators. From horror movie cameos that introduced an entire generation to classic cinema, to improvised voice lines that became permanent characters, to dark historical connections that ground the show in real-world tragedy, these 12 Easter eggs prove that SpongeBob was never just a simple kids' cartoon. Each hidden detail serves a purpose, whether it is honoring the cast and crew, rewarding longtime fans, or adding layers of meaning that make the show richer with every rewatch. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. The Nosferatu phenomenon, horror's most unexpected cameo. In the fall of 2002, SpongeBob SquarePants aired an episode that would introduce an entire generation to one of cinema's oldest and most iconic, vampires. The episode was called Graveyard Shift, and buried at the very end was a moment so strange, so unexpected, that it became one of the most talked about scenes in the show's history. A black and white vampire from a 1922 silent film appeared for just a few seconds, flipping a light switch on and off with a mischievous grin. This vampire was Nosferatu, and his random appearance in a children's cartoon about a talking sponge sparked countless questions, memes, and discussions that continue today. The episode itself centers around a simple premise. Krabs decides to keep the Krusty Krab open 24 hours a day to make more money. SpongeBob is excited about working the night shift, but Squidward is miserable and bored. To entertain himself, Squidward decides to scare SpongeBob by making up a ghost story about something called the hash-slinging slasher. According to Squidward's tale, the hash-slinging slasher was a fry cook who worked at the Krusty Krab years ago. One night, he accidentally cut off his own hand and replaced it with a rusty spatula. Then he got hit by a bus and died. Now, every Tuesday night, his ghost returns to the restaurant to haunt whoever is working. Squidward explains that there are 3 signs of the slasher's arrival. First, the lights will flicker on and off. Second, the phone will ring, but nobody will be on the other end. Third, the ghost will arrive on a bus. SpongeBob, being SpongeBob, believes every word of this story and becomes terrified. Squidward laughs at him and says he made the whole thing up. But then something weird starts happening. The lights begin to flicker. The phone rings with nobody there. A bus pulls up outside the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob and Squidward both panic, convinced that Squidward's made-up story is somehow coming true. They hide and scream as a dark figure approaches the restaurant. The figure has what looks like a spatula for a hand, just like in the story. The tension builds and builds until the figure finally steps into the light. But instead of a terrifying ghost, it turns out to be just a regular fish looking for a job application. He was nervous about calling earlier, which explains the hang-up phone calls. He was holding a spatula in his hand because he wanted to apply for a fry cook position. SpongeBob and Squidward feel relieved and even laugh about how scared they were. But then Squidward asks an important question. If the new guy explains the phone calls and the spatula, what was causing the lights to flicker? Right on cue, the lights flicker again. The camera cuts to a light switch. Standing next to it, flipping it up and down with a huge smile on his face, is Nosferatu. SpongeBob and Squidward look at the vampire and say, "Nosferatu," in an annoyed but somehow familiar tone, like this is something he does all the time. Then Nosferatu flicks the lights off one more time, and the episode ends in darkness. That scene lasts maybe 10 seconds, yet it became one of the most memorable moments in SpongeBob history. For many kids watching in 2002, this was their very first time seeing Nosferatu. They had no idea who this creepy vampire was or what movie he came from. The joke worked on multiple levels. Younger viewers found it funny because the answer to the mystery was so random and unexpected. Older viewers and parents recognized the reference to classic horror cinema. Everyone was confused in the best possible way. Why would a vampire from a 100-year-old silent film show up in SpongeBob? What did this have to do with anything? The complete randomness of it made it brilliant. The story behind how Nosferatu ended up in SpongeBob is almost as interesting as the scene itself. Jay Lender was one of the writers and storyboard directors for Graveyard Shift. When they were working on the episode, they needed something to explain why the lights were flickering. The original plan was to introduce a character called Floorboard Harry. Earlier in the episode, SpongeBob would have been shown feeding Floorboard Harry, who lived under the floor of the Krusty Krab. Then at the end, Floorboard Harry would be revealed as the one playing with the light switch. But when they were putting the episode together, the Floorboard Harry setup got cut. This left them with a problem. They still needed someone to be flicking the lights, but now they had no setup for who it could be. Jay Linder needed to come up with a replacement quickly. He thought back to his childhood and remembered reading a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland. This magazine featured photos and articles about classic horror movies. One image that always stuck in his mind was a still photograph from the 1922 film Nosferatu. The photo showed Count Orlok, the vampire from the movie, standing in a doorway with an eerie look on his face. Young Jay Linder had never actually seen the full Nosferatu movie. He just knew this one creepy image that appeared in the magazine. To him, Nosferatu existed as this strange, disconnected piece of horror imagery that made no sense outside of its original context. When Linder needed a random, unexpected horror character to explain the flickering lights, that childhood memory came rushing back. He pitched the idea to Stephen Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob. Hillenburg loved it. Linder has said in interviews that Hillenburg gave his team a lot of creative freedom. If you could sell him on an idea and it was memorable, he would let you do it. The Nosferatu cameo was exactly the kind of weird, unexpected humor that made SpongeBob special. It did not make logical sense, but that was the whole point. The randomness was what made it funny. There were some practical decisions that went into making the scene work. First, they had to get footage of Nosferatu. They found a still image from the original 1922 film online. The image showed Max Schreck, the actor who played Count Orlok, standing in a doorway. But in the original photo, Orlok looked serious and creepy. For the SpongeBob scene to work, they needed him to look playful and mischievous, like he was pulling a prank. So Nick Jennings, one of the artists on the show, used Photoshop to add a big smile to Orlok's face. This made the vampire look less threatening and more like he was just having fun messing with the lights. The second decision was about what to call the character. Count Orlok is the name of the vampire character in the movie. Nosferatu is the title of the film itself. But Linder decided to have SpongeBob and Squidward call him Nosferatu instead of Count Orlok. He made this choice because the word Nosferatu was more recognizable. Even people who had never seen the movie might have heard the title before. It also sounded creepier and more mysterious than Count Orlok. This decision ended up shaping how an entire generation would refer to the character. The timing of when the episode aired added another layer to the story. Graveyard Shift first appeared on television on September 6, 2002. Fans later discovered that September 6th would have been Max Schreck's 123rd birthday if he were still alive. Max Schreck was the actor who played Count Orlok in the original 1922 film. He was born on September 6, 1879, and died in 1936. Whether the SpongeBob team knew this, or it was just a coincidence, remains unclear. But it adds a nice touch to the story that Nosferatu's SpongeBob debut happened on the birthday of the man who first brought the character to life. The cultural impact of this 10-second scene cannot be overstated. Before Graveyard Shift, most young people born in the 1990s had never heard of Nosferatu. Silent films from 1922 were not exactly on their radar. But after this episode, millions of kids knew exactly what Nosferatu looked like. That image of the vampire standing in the doorway became instantly recognizable to an entire generation. In interviews years later, Jay Linder reflected on this. He talked about how his own first experience with Nosferatu was seeing that disconnected image in a magazine, completely out of context. And because of SpongeBob, he gave millions of kids that exact same experience. For 20 years, an entire generation's introduction to Count Orlok was as a weird, random joke in a SpongeBob episode. The 1922 Nosferatu film itself has an interesting history. It was a German silent horror movie directed by F.W. Murnau. The film was actually an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. Because they did not have the rights to use the Dracula name or characters, they changed the vampire's name to Count Orlok and called the film Nosferatu. The word Nosferatu roughly translates to plague carrier or undead in Romanian. The widow of Bram Stoker sued the filmmakers for copyright violation, and a court ordered all copies of the film to be destroyed. However, some copies survived, and Nosferatu went on to become one of the most influential horror films ever made. Max Schreck's performance as Count Orlok, with his bald head, pointed ears, long fingers, and creepy stare, created an image of vampires that influenced countless horror movies that came after. For 16 years after Graveyard Shift, Nosferatu did not appear in another SpongeBob episode. The cameo seemed like a one-time joke, but the character was so popular with fans that the show eventually brought him back. In 2018, SpongeBob aired an episode called The Night Patty. This episode revealed that Nosferatu works at the Krusty Krab as the night shift manager. Instead of using the old black and white footage, the show gave Nosferatu a new animated look. He still appeared in black and white with grainy film effects to match his 1920s origins, but now he could move around and interact with other characters. The episode showed that Nosferatu is actually an employee of the Krusty Krab, who handles the restaurant during late-night hours. This was the first time in 17 years that Nosferatu appeared in a SpongeBob episode focused on him. After The Night Patty, he became a recurring character. He has shown up in several more episodes and even got expanded roles. The spin-off show Camp Coral, which shows SpongeBob and his friends as kids at summer camp, introduced a young version of the vampire called Kid Feratu. This version of the character is a child vampire who attends the same camp. He still has many of the classic Nosferatu features, but adapted for a younger character. He carries an umbrella during the day because, as a vampire, he cannot handle direct sunlight. What makes the Nosferatu Easter egg so special is how perfectly it captures the spirit of SpongeBob's humor. The show has always been willing to include jokes that go over kids' heads while still being funny to them. Adults watching with their children might catch references to old movies, while kids just laugh at the absurdity. The Nosferatu cameo is the ultimate example of this. A child watching in 2002 had no idea who Nosferatu was, but they could still laugh at the randomness of a creepy vampire showing up to flip light switches. Meanwhile, their parents or older siblings might recognize the reference and appreciate the clever use of classic horror imagery in a cartoon about a sponge. The popularity of this Easter egg shows how SpongeBob helped preserve pieces of film history for new generations. Without that Graveyard Shift episode, would anyone born after 1995 know what Nosferatu looks like? Probably a lot fewer people. SpongeBob created a bridge between modern kids and a 100-year-old German silent film. When Robert Eggers released a new Nosferatu remake in December 2024, countless articles mentioned how an entire generation knew the vampire from SpongeBob. The show kept Count Orlok relevant in popular culture in a way that film preservation societies never could have. The Nosferatu cameo also influenced how SpongeBob approached Easter eggs going forward. After seeing the positive response, the writers became more willing to include random references and callbacks. Later seasons would fill backgrounds with items from previous episodes, create running gags that spanned years, and include jokes that only made sense if you had been watching since the beginning. The Nosferatu moment proved that SpongeBob fans paid attention to details and appreciated when the show rewarded that attention. Today, the Graveyard Shift episode is considered one of the best in the entire series. It ranks number 5 on IMDb's list of highest-rated SpongeBob episodes, with a score of 9.3 out of 10. While the episode is funny throughout, with great jokes about the hash-slinging slasher and SpongeBob's reactions to Squidward's scary story, most people remember it specifically for those final seconds with Nosferatu. That one brief moment overshadowed everything else in the episode and became a defining piece of SpongeBob history. The Easter egg works because it follows a simple but effective formula. Build tension with a mystery, provide a logical explanation that releases the tension, then immediately rebuild that tension with something completely unexpected and absurd. The episode makes you think the scary story was just a coincidence, then throws in an actual monster at the last second. But instead of being scary, Nosferatu is just messing around with the lights like a bored coworker. The mix of horror imagery with childish pranks creates comedy gold. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Nosferatu's random appearance at the Krusty Krab opened the door for all kinds of other strange things to happen in Bikini Bottom. But sometimes the best Easter eggs are not random vampires, They are the sounds that play over and over again until they become part of the show's DNA, like one particular fish who cannot seem to stop hurting himself in increasingly ridiculous ways. Section 2. My Leg, animation's most enduring stock sound. Every great show has its running gags. Friends had How You Doing? The Simpsons had Homer's Dough, and SpongeBob SquarePants has a brown fish screaming "My leg" in the background while chaos unfolds around him. This simple sound effect has appeared in over 80 episodes across more than 2 decades, making it one of the longest-running jokes in animated television history. But what makes this Easter egg truly special is that it started completely by accident, became a beloved part of the show's identity, and eventually gave a random background character his own starring role. The story begins in the recording booth during the first season of SpongeBob. The voice actors were working on an episode called Boating School, which aired in 1999. This episode follows SpongeBob's repeated attempts to pass his driving test at Mrs. Puff's boating school. At the end of the episode, SpongeBob crashes into Mrs. Puff's lighthouse, causing it to fall over. The scene required voices of random fish in the background reacting to the destruction. The script probably just said something like "crowd screams" or "people yell in pain." It did not specify exactly what anyone should say. Doug Lawrence was in the recording session that day. Lawrence is best known as the voice of Plankton, SpongeBob's tiny villain who constantly tries to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula. But like many voice actors on the show, Lawrence also voiced background characters and crowd reactions. When the scene called for random people to be in pain from the lighthouse falling over, Lawrence decided to yell, "My leg!" He did not plan it. He did not clear it with anyone first. It just came out in the moment. And then he kept saying it, "My leg," over and over in different variations. The directors and sound editors thought it was funny, so they kept it in the episode, but nobody expected it to become anything more than a throwaway background noise. After all, SpongeBob episodes are full of random sounds, weird voices, and background chatter. Most of these noises get used once and forgotten, but something about "my leg" stuck. The delivery was perfect, the timing was funny, and the idea that someone was specifically concerned about their leg during a massive disaster added an extra layer of humor to chaotic scenes. The second season started using the sound effect more regularly. Whenever something crazy happened in Bikini Bottom, whenever SpongeBob or Patrick accidentally caused destruction, whenever a scene needed a vocal reaction to injury, the sound editors would drop in Doug Lawrence's "My leg" recording. It appeared in Hall Monitor when SpongeBob causes a traffic accident. It showed up in Suds when customers at the Krusty Krab think SpongeBob sneezed on their food. It played in Arg when Mr. Krabs throws someone out of the restaurant. The sound became so common that fans started noticing it and waiting for it. Spotting the "My leg" guy became a game for devoted viewers. Doug Lawrence later explained how the whole thing started in an interview. He said it was an ad-lib. The scene called for everyone writhing in pain, and I said it, and I kept saying it. Fans started talking about it and named him Fred. He has his own episode. This quote reveals something interesting. The SpongeBob crew did not name the character. The fans did. Viewers started calling him Fred, and that name stuck. The show eventually made it official. The character's model number in the animation system is Incidental 40, but everyone calls him Fred now. Fred became more than just a voice. He got a face and a body to go with the sound. Fred is a brown fish who usually wears brown pants with a black belt. He has a fairly ordinary design compared to many other Bikini Bottom residents. He does not have any extreme features or unusual characteristics. This actually makes sense for the joke. Fred represents the average citizen of Bikini Bottom who constantly suffers because of the main character's crazy adventures. He is an everyman figure who just wants to go about his day without his leg getting hurt. The show started using Fred in different ways as the series continued. Sometimes he appeared on screen when the line played, so viewers could see what was happening to his leg. Other times, the "my leg" sound happened completely off-screen, implying that Fred was somewhere nearby having another accident. Both versions worked for different reasons. Seeing Fred's leg actually get hurt added visual comedy. Hearing "my leg" from somewhere off-screen suggested that disasters were happening all over Bikini Bottom, even in places we could not see. The comparison to the Wilhelm scream is not accidental. The Wilhelm scream is a famous stock sound effect used in hundreds of movies and TV shows since the 1950s. It is a man screaming, "Ah!" in a very distinctive way. Sound designers started using it as an inside joke, hiding it in everything from Star Wars to Toy Story. Movie fans turned finding the Wilhelm scream into a game, just like SpongeBob fans did with My Leg. Both sounds share something important. They are funny because they are specific and recognizable, but also because they show up in random places where you might not expect them. As SpongeBob entered its later seasons, the writers became more aware of how much fans loved the My Leg gag. They started using it more deliberately and even played with variations. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie from 2004, Fred appears at the Krusty Krab 2 when King Neptune takes off his crown. Neptune is completely bald under the crown, and Fred screams, my eyes," instead of "my leg." This became its own popular meme, separate from the original running gag. The image of Fred covering his eyes in horror became a reaction image used all over the internet. Other variations appeared throughout the series. In one episode, Fred corrects himself mid-scream, yelling, "My leg! Of my pants!" when SpongeBob unravels everyone's clothing with a loose string. In another episode, when Gary the Snail kicks someone, Fred appears and yells, "His legs!" instead. The show even used the gag in graffiti form. In the episode, The Nitwitting, you can see "My leg" written on a wall alongside other running gags from the series. These creative variations kept the joke fresh while acknowledging its place in SpongeBob history. The show tracked Fred's injuries with surprising consistency. His left leg seems to suffer the most damage over the years. Multiple episodes show Fred limping, walking with crutches, or wearing a cast on his leg. The episode Squids on a Bus shows Fred yelling, "My leg," during a bus fight, then later appearing with crutches and a cast. This attention to detail suggests the writers kept track of how much abuse they put Fred through, even though most episodes do not reference previous injuries. By season 11, which aired in 2018, the My-Legged gag had become such a big part of SpongeBob culture that the show decided to give Fred his own episode. The episode is simply titled My Leg, and it focuses entirely on the character and his famous catchphrase. This marked nearly 20 years since Fred first yelled about his leg in boating school. An entire generation had grown up hearing this sound effect, and now they would get to see Fred's story. My leg opens with a montage showing Fred's many leg injuries throughout the series. We see clips from dozens of episodes where Fred suffered various accidents. The montage is funny, but also kind of sad. This poor fish has been hurt so many times. After the montage, we see Fred finally getting the cast removed from his leg at the doctor's office. The doctor warns him that if he does not take care of his leg, he will need to get a robotic replacement. Fred promises to be more careful. SpongeBob overhears this conversation and decides to help. He makes it his mission to protect Fred's leg from any possible harm. But SpongeBob being SpongeBob, his protection methods cause more problems than they solve. He follows Fred around, jumping in front of anything that might hurt his leg. SpongeBob covers up dangerous objects, pushes people away from Fred, and generally makes Fred's life difficult while trying to help. The episode shows Fred at his workplace, where SpongeBob stops him from using a woodcutter. SpongeBob prevents Fred from walking over hot coals. He even attacks other citizens who get too close to Fred. The episode then reveals the real reason Fred wants to go back to the hospital. He is in love with a nurse named Nurse Bazooka. Fred actually misses being injured because it means he gets to see her. This adds an unexpected emotional layer to the character. Fred is not just a punching bag for random injuries. He is a person with feelings and desires like anyone else. When SpongeBob learns about Fred's crush, he switches his mission from protecting Fred's leg to breaking it so Fred can go back to the hospital. SpongeBob tries everything to break Fred's leg. He hits it with a hammer. He zaps it with electricity. He even gets the Alaskan bullworm to bite it off. Nothing works. Fred's leg seems indestructible now that the plot needs it to break instead of protecting it. This is funny because it reverses the usual situation. For 20 years, Fred's leg broke from the tiniest accidents. Now that he actually wants it broken, It will not break no matter what SpongeBob does. The final plan involves laying Fred's leg on train tracks, so a train will run over it. Just before the train hits Fred's leg, a robot character named Tom appears and stops the train. Tom is screaming, "Not my leg!" and freaking out about leg safety. SpongeBob removes his own leg and gives it to Tom, which somehow makes Tom happy, but also sends him to the hospital. SpongeBob grows his leg back because cartoon logic, but the ambulance returning from the hospital runs over Fred's entire body except for his leg. This finally gets Fred to the hospital, where he reunites with Nurse Bazooka. At the hospital, Fred sings a love song to Nurse Bazooka, titled "My Leg is in Love." The song is genuinely catchy and sweet. It uses Fred's famous catchphrase, but changes the meaning completely. Instead of screaming about pain, he is singing about his feelings. Nurse Bazooka loves the song and kisses Fred repeatedly on the cheek. The episode ends with a closing transition that accidentally snaps off Fred's leg, causing him to scream, "My leg!" one more time. The episode My Leg is remarkable for several reasons. First, it proves that SpongeBob never forgot its roots or its running gags, even after more than a decade on the air. Second, it shows respect for the fans who had been following the joke since 1999. Third, it gives depth to a character who existed only as a sound effect for most of the show's history. Fred went from a random ad-lib to a fully developed character with his own episode, his own love story, and his own musical number. The episode received mixed reactions from fans. Some people loved seeing Fred finally get attention and a happy ending. They appreciated the show acknowledging one of its most famous running gags. Other fans felt the episode overused the "my leg" joke, to the point where it stopped being funny. One of the things that made the gag work so well originally was its sparseness. Fred appeared randomly and briefly. By making an entire episode about it, some fans felt the show explained the joke too much and wore it out. This is a common problem with running gags that get too much attention. Despite the mixed response to the dedicated episode, My Leg remains one of SpongeBob's most beloved Easter eggs. The sound effect continues to appear in new episodes. It showed up in the 2020 movie Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, where Fred gets both of his legs crushed in separate incidents. First, he crushes one leg and screams, "My leg!" then misses. Puff crashes into him and crushes his other leg, making him scream, "My other leg!" Even in newer SpongeBob content, the writers find ways to keep the gag alive. The cultural impact of Fred and his leg extends beyond just SpongeBob. The "my leg" sound has been used in memes, reaction videos, and internet jokes for over 20 years. People who have never watched a full episode of SpongeBob still know about the "my leg" guy. The sound is instantly recognizable and has become part of internet culture. You can find compilation videos on YouTube collecting every single "my leg" moment from the entire series. These videos have millions of views. The success of this Easter egg teaches us something about comedy and running gags. The best recurring jokes are simple, specific, and surprising. "My leg" works because it is just absurd enough to be funny, while still making logical sense. Of course, someone would yell about their leg if it got hurt. But yelling specifically about the leg, instead of just screaming generally, adds personality to the reaction. The specificity makes it memorable. Doug Lawrence's original ad-lib created something that outlived his expectations. He just yelled something random in a recording booth one day, and it turned into a piece of television history. The sound effect appeared in over 80 episodes across 13 seasons. It inspired an entire episode. It created a beloved character. It became a meme. All because one voice actor decided to be specific about which body part was hurting. Fred's story also reminds us that background characters matter. SpongeBob has always treated its world like a real place full of real people. Even characters who appear for just a few seconds have personalities and lives beyond what we see. Fred could have just been a nameless fish who yells sometimes. Instead, he became Fred, a working-class citizen of Bikini Bottom with bad luck, a dangerous job, and romantic feelings for his nurse. The show gave him dignity and depth, even while using him for slapstick comedy. The "my leg" gag represents everything that makes SpongeBob's humor special. It rewards longtime viewers who recognize the sound. It adds layers to simple scenes of chaos. It creates continuity across hundreds of episodes. And it proves that sometimes the best jokes are not the ones you plan, but the ones that happen naturally when creative people are just having fun in a recording booth. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While Fred spent years trying to protect his one leg from constant injury, the show's main character has spent even longer protecting a secret, though the origins of SpongeBob's very name involved avoiding an entirely different kind of legal injury. Section 3. SpongeBoy to SpongeBob. The copyright crisis. That almost changed everything. Imagine if one of the most successful cartoon characters in history had a completely different name. Imagine if kids around the world were not singing "Who Lives in a Pineapple Under the Sea?" SpongeBob SquarePants, but instead singing about someone called SpongeBoy. It sounds wrong, does not it? The name SpongeBob SquarePants feels perfect for the character. The two words fit together naturally, rolling off the tongue in a way that makes you smile. But this iconic name almost never happened. The character we all know and love was originally called SpongeBoy, and the show was going to be titled SpongeBoy Ahoy! A last-minute legal problem forced creator Steven Hillenburg to completely rename his main character after months of work were already finished. This Easter egg is not hidden in an episode or tucked into the background of a scene. Instead, it is buried in the show's production history, occasionally referenced in episodes as an inside joke for fans who know the real story. The tale begins in the mid-1990s, when Steven Hillenburg was developing his idea for an underwater cartoon. Hillenburg had studied marine biology in college and had even worked as a marine science educator. He created an educational comic book called The Intertidal Zone to teach his students about ocean life. One of the characters in this comic was Bob the Sponge, a sea sponge who wore sunglasses and looked very different from the character we know today. When Hillenburg decided to turn his ocean knowledge into a television show, he used Bob the Sponge as inspiration for his main character. Hillenburg wanted the show to feature creatures that were not usually the stars of cartoons. Most ocean shows focused on dolphins, sharks, whales, or colorful fish. But Hillenburg asked himself an interesting question. What is the weirdest animal in the ocean? The answer he came up with was a sponge. Sea sponges are strange creatures that do not look or act like typical animals. They just sit on the ocean floor, filtering water for food. They do not have brains, hearts, or most organs that other animals have. They are basically living filters. This made them perfect for a cartoon, because nobody had expectations about how a sponge should act or what personality it should have. When Hillenburg started drawing his main character, he initially wanted to use the shape of a real sea sponge. Natural sea sponges are lumpy, bumpy, and irregular. They come in various shapes and sizes. But as Hillenburg worked on the design, he realized something. A lumpy, organic shape would be harder to animate consistently. It would also not convey the personality he wanted. He was going for a character who was clean, optimistic, innocent, and a bit nerdy. So Hillenburg made a brilliant decision. He drew the character as a kitchen sponge instead, a bright yellow square with holes in it. This squeaky clean square shape perfectly matched the character's innocent, upbeat personality. The early design sketches show some interesting differences from the final SpongeBob we know. The original character wore a red hat with a green base and a white business shirt with a red tie. Over time, Hillenburg refined the look. He removed the hat. He changed the pants to brown. He simplified the design to make it easier to animate while keeping the character recognizable. But throughout all these design changes, one thing stayed constant. The character's name was SpongeBoy. Hillenburg loved the name SpongeBoy. It was simple, direct, and told you exactly what the character was: a boy who is a sponge. The show was going to be called SpongeBoy Ahoy, combining the character's name with a nautical greeting. Everything was moving forward with this name. The scripts were written with SpongeBoy as the main character. The voice actors recorded their lines calling him SpongeBoy. In fact, the entire 7-minute pilot episode was fully voice acted before anyone realized there was a problem. The pilot episode took months of work to create. The writers wrote the script. The storyboard artists drew every scene. The animators brought those drawings to life. The voice actors, including Tom Kenny as SpongeBob, recorded all their dialogue. The sound designers added music and effects. The pilot was essentially finished and ready to be shown to Nickelodeon executives. Then someone from Nickelodeon's legal department did a routine check. They searched to make sure the name SpongeBob was not already being used by another company. This is standard practice before launching any new product or show. You do not want to accidentally use a name that someone else owns the rights to. The legal team discovered a problem. The name SpongeBob was already in use. This meant Nickelodeon could not use it for their show without risking a lawsuit. At first, people thought the name was being used by a cleaning product company. For years, the story was that SpongeBob was the name of a mop. This made a certain kind of sense. Sponges and mops both clean things, so SpongeBob could logically be a brand name for a cleaning product. Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob, even said in interviews that he heard it was a mop or something. This story spread widely and appeared in official SpongeBob trivia books. But the mop story turned out to be incorrect. Researchers digging into the show's history could not find any evidence of a SpongeBob mop existing in the 1990s. No trademark registrations, no product catalogs, no advertisements. The mop explanation became an urban legend, one of those facts that everyone repeated without anyone actually confirming it was true. So if there was no SpongeBob mop, what was the real conflict? The actual answer involves a company called Pintec and an artist named Kevin Pope. In the 1990s, Pintec made a line of art supplies called Cool Art pencils. These were not ordinary pencils. Each pencil was wrapped with colorful artwork, mostly featuring characters from newspaper comic strips. One of these comic strips was created by Kevin Pope and featured a character diving into a swimming pool. The character was a sponge, and he was labeled SpongeBob in the artwork. Kevin Pope's SpongeBob was not a major character with his own comic strip. He appeared in this one piece of art on pencils. The image showed the sponge character about to dive into a pool, drawn in a humorous style typical of newspaper comics. Pintec had copyrighted this Cool Art brand and all the artwork that went on their pencils. Technically, Kevin Pope owned the rights to his SpongeBob character, but Pintec owned the rights to use it on their products. This meant the name SpongeBob was protected, even though it was just on pencils and not a TV show or major character. The Nickelodeon legal team decided the risk was too high. Even though Pope's SpongeBob and Hillenburg's SpongeBob were completely different characters used in different ways, the names were identical. A lawsuit could delay or even prevent the show from airing. The pencil company might demand money or try to stop Nickelodeon from using the name. Rather than fight a legal battle or negotiate for rights to a name, Nickelodeon told Hillenburg he needed to pick a new name for his character. This news must have been devastating. Imagine spending months or even years developing a show, creating a character, building a world, and then being told at the last minute that you have to change the main character's name. Everything had been recorded with the name SpongeBob. Marketing materials probably already existed. Early promotional materials might have been printed. And now Hillenburg had to come up with something new, something that would work just as well, and he had to do it quickly. Hillenburg knew one thing for certain. The new name had to include the word sponge. This was not negotiable. If he changed the name to something completely different, viewers might not understand what the character was supposed to be. Hillenburg was particularly worried that kids might think the yellow square character was a block of cheese. After all, both sponges and cheese are yellow, full of holes, and kind of square-shaped. Without sponge in the name, the show might accidentally create a cheese-loving audience instead of a sponge-loving one. So Hillenburg needed a name that kept sponge, but replaced boy with something else. He tried different combinations. SpongeBob was one option. Sponge Tom, Sponge Sam. Various names were tested. The story of how they settled on SpongeBob involves Tom Kenny, the voice actor. Kenny came into the studio one day and saw a picture of the character design. Looking at the yellow square wearing brown pants, Kenny made an observation. He said something like, "Boy, look at this sponge in square pants," thinking he can get a job in a fast food place. The phrase square pants caught Hillenburg's attention immediately. It was perfect. The character literally wore square pants because he was square-shaped. But square also has another meaning. Calling someone square means they are old-fashioned, uncool, or nerdy. This double meaning perfectly described the character's personality. He was optimistic, innocent, and genuinely enthusiastic about things that others found boring or uncool. The name SpongeBob SquarePants told you everything about the character in just 3 words. Hillenburg loved it. The name had a nice rhythm to it. SpongeBob SquarePants. 3 words, 7 syllables. Easy to remember, fun to say. It sounded silly enough for a kid's show, but clever enough that adults would appreciate the wordplay. The decision was made. SpongeBoy would become SpongeBob SquarePants. The show would be called SpongeBob SquarePants instead of SpongeBoy Ahoy. This meant going back and re-recording certain parts of the pilot episode. Anytime a character said the name SpongeBoy, the voice actors had to come back and say SpongeBob instead. The sound engineers had to replace the old audio with the new recordings. This added extra work and expense, but there was no choice. The show could not move forward with a name they were not allowed to use. The final version of SpongeBob kept most of SpongeBoy's design: the yellow square body with holes, the brown pants with black belt, the red tie and white shirt, the big smile, and optimistic personality. But there were some small differences between early SpongeBoy sketches and the final SpongeBob design. The original SpongeBoy had 13 holes visible on his body. The final SpongeBob has only 7 holes that appear consistently. SpongeBoy wore that colorful red, blue, green, and yellow hat in early designs. SpongeBob does not wear a hat at all, except for special occasions. SpongeBoy's shoes were longer and pointier. SpongeBob's shoes are shorter and rounder. Here is where the Easter egg comes in. The show occasionally references the original SpongeBoy name as an inside joke. In the episode Squeaky Boots, Mr. Krabs calls SpongeBob SpongeBoy Me Bob. This line appears to be a mistake at first, mixing up the characters' first and last names. But fans who know the production history recognize it as a reference to the original name. Mr. Krabs says SpongeBoy, then corrects himself by adding Me Bob, as if he momentarily forgot the character's real name. The same thing happens in the episode Crab Borg. Mr. Krabs refers to SpongeBob as SpongeBoy Me Bob again. This cannot be a coincidence. The writers deliberately included these references for fans who knew the behind-the-scenes story. It is the show winking at its own history, acknowledging the name that almost was. Some fans also noticed that in One Trick Sponge, there is another possible reference to SpongeBoy, though this one is more debatable. The SpongeBoy story reminds us how many random factors shape the entertainment we love. If Pintech had never made those cool art pencils, SpongeBob would be SpongeBoy today. If Kevin Pope had never drawn his SpongeBoy comic for those pencils, the conflict would never have happened. If Tom Kinney had never made that comment about square pants, Hillenburg might have picked a completely different replacement name. Tiny decisions and random coincidences created the character we know. It also shows us the importance of trademark and copyright searches. Companies spend money on legal teams to check these things for a reason. Imagine if Nickelodeon had ignored the conflict and used SpongeBoy anyway. The pencil company could have sued. The show might have been pulled off the air. Nickelodeon might have lost money. All the work creating the show could have been wasted. A simple legal check, even though it caused problems at the time, ultimately protected everyone involved. The name change might have actually made the show better. SpongeBob SquarePants is more memorable than SpongeBoy Ahoy. The name has more personality and character. It tells you more about who this person is. SpongeBoy is fine, but it is generic. SpongeBob SquarePants is specific and unique. You cannot imagine another character having that name. It belongs completely to this one yellow square sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea. Today, SpongeBob SquarePants is one of the most valuable cartoon properties in the world. The show has aired for over 25 years. It has generated billions of dollars in merchandise sales. It has spawned movies, video games, Broadway musicals, and spin-off shows. The character's image appears on everything from lunchboxes to clothing to theme park rides. And all of this success happened under the name SpongeBob SquarePants, a name that only exists because Pintech made some pencils in the 1990s. The SpongeBoy Easter egg is different from most others in this list. You cannot spot it by watching episodes closely, or listening for specific sounds. Instead, you discover it by learning about the show's history and then catching those rare moments when the show references its own past. It is an Easter egg that rewards curiosity and research, not just careful viewing. And it connects us to that chaotic moment in 1997 when Steven Hillenburg learned he had to rename his character and somehow, against all odds, came up with something even better. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While SpongeBob's name came from last-minute improvisation and legal necessity, the show's entire musical identity was carefully built from the beginning around sounds, from a tropical paradise that existed long before any of the characters were drawn. Section 4. Hawaiian Soul, the tropical foundation of Bikini Bottom. Close your eyes and think about SpongeBob SquarePants. What do you hear? Chances are, you immediately started humming the theme song. Oh, who lives in a pineapple under the sea? But beyond that iconic opening, what else fills your mind? If you are a true fan, you probably hear steel guitars, ukuleles, and cheerful island melodies. The world of Bikini Bottom sounds like a tropical vacation, with light and breezy music that makes you feel like you are relaxing on a Hawaiian beach. This is not an accident. From the very beginning, creator Steven Hillenburg built SpongeBob's entire sound around Hawaiian music. This Easter egg is not hidden in one scene or one episode. It is woven into the fabric of every single episode, creating an atmosphere that is so natural and fitting that most viewers never even notice it is there. The story of SpongeBob's Hawaiian sound starts with Steven Hillenburg's creative vision. Hillenburg did not just want to make a cartoon about ocean creatures. He wanted to create a complete underwater world that felt real, alive, and fun. He understood that music shapes how we feel about what we are watching. The right music can make a scene feel scary, sad, exciting, or joyful. Hillenburg knew that Bikini Bottom needed its own musical identity, something that would separate it from other cartoons and make it memorable. When Hillenburg was developing the show, he talked to Tom Kenny, who would become the voice of SpongeBob. In one of these early conversations, Hillenburg described exactly what kind of music he wanted for the show. Kenny later remembered Hillenburg saying something like, "You know those old Betty Boop cartoons? Those crazy Hawaiian records?" This reference is important. Betty Boop cartoons from the 1930s often used Hawaiian music in their soundtracks. Back then, Hawaiian music was considered exotic and fun. It represented paradise, vacation, and a carefree lifestyle. Old cartoons from the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s frequently used Hawaiian music as background tracks because it made everything feel lighter and more entertaining. Hillenburg wanted to capture that same feeling. He wanted SpongeBob to have a timeless quality, like those vintage cartoons that people still loved decades after they were made. By using Hawaiian music, he connected SpongeBob to that golden age of animation. But the choice was not just about nostalgia. Hawaiian music actually makes perfect sense for an underwater show. Both Hawaii and the ocean represent escape from everyday life. They both make people think of vacation, relaxation, and natural beauty. The connection between tropical islands and underwater worlds is natural because they exist in the same warm, sunny part of the world. The opening sequence of every SpongeBob episode features real underwater footage mixed with animation. You see actual ocean scenes with real fish and real coral. The theme song plays over these images, immediately establishing that we are entering a world that is both real and fantastical. The music in the opening is upbeat and silly, featuring a sea shanty style that sailors might sing on a ship. But after the opening, when the actual episode begins, the Hawaiian influence takes over. Most of the background music throughout the show comes from a collection called the APM Music Library, which contains hundreds of vintage Hawaiian recordings. The show uses specific Hawaiian songs that have real histories and meanings. One of the most frequently used tracks is called Hilo March. This song was written by a man named Joseph Kapo'ea, who was a member of the Royal Hawaiian Band. He originally called the song Ke Ala Tuberos when he wrote it in the 1800s. The song celebrates the beauty of Hilo, a city in Hawaii, and describes the lehua flower that grows there. In 1881, the title was changed to Hilo March, and the song became popular across Hawaii. More than a century later, that same song plays in SpongeBob episodes whenever the show needs cheerful, upbeat background music. Another Hawaiian song used frequently in SpongeBob is Pua Pauakalani. This song has an especially interesting history. It was written by Queen Liliuokalani, who was the last queen of Hawaii before the Hawaiian monarchy was overthrown. She wrote this song while she was imprisoned in her own palace. A supporter would regularly bring her flowers during this difficult time, and the queen wrote Pua Pauakalani as a tribute to this kind person. The song's title refers to these flowers. In SpongeBob, Pua Pauakalani usually plays during sad or emotional moments. The gentle steel guitar and ukulele create a feeling of tenderness and sympathy. Hawaiian Breeze is another track that appears throughout the series. This one was composed more recently by a musician named John Jelmer, specifically for television and film use. It captures the classic Hawaiian sound with guitars and ukuleles playing gentle, flowing melodies. Hawaiian Breeze typically plays during calm scenes, when characters are relaxing or having quiet conversations. The music helps establish mood without drawing attention to itself. The show also uses Aloha O'o, one of the most famous Hawaiian songs ever written. This song was also composed by Queen Liliuokalani, the same queen who wrote Pua Pauakalani. Aloha Oe is a farewell song, expressing the sweet sadness of saying goodbye to someone you love. In Hawaii, people still sing this song at airports when loved ones are leaving. In SpongeBob, it sometimes plays when characters are parting ways or when something is ending. These songs provide about 70% of SpongeBob's background music. The remaining 30% comes from original compositions created specifically for the show and from other stock music libraries. But the Hawaiian tracks dominate, creating the show's signature sound. Most viewers cannot name the specific songs playing in the background, but they definitely notice when SpongeBob is on TV. The sound is instantly recognizable. The Hawaiian influence goes beyond just music. The visual design of Bikini Bottom includes many Hawaiian and Polynesian elements. Throughout the show, you can spot tiki masks decorating various locations. Tiki culture originated in Polynesia, which includes Hawaii. Tiki refers to carved wooden statues representing gods or ancestors. In the mid-1900s, tiki culture became popular in America, especially in restaurants, bars, and hotels that wanted to create a tropical atmosphere. SpongeBob includes these tiki decorations in the background of many scenes, reinforcing the tropical island feeling. One of the most interesting visual Easter eggs related to Hawaiian culture involves the flowers in the sky. If you watch SpongeBob carefully, you will notice that clouds sometimes look like flowers. These are not realistic clouds shaped like flowers. They are literally drawn as flowers floating in the sky. This design choice was inspired by traditional Hawaiian shirt patterns. Hawaiian shirts, also called aloha shirts, typically feature bright tropical flowers in repeating patterns. The SpongeBob animators took this idea and applied it to the sky itself. The flower clouds appear throughout the series, but they blend in so naturally that many viewers never consciously notice them. They just add to the overall tropical, cheerful atmosphere. The show took its Hawaiian and Tiki influences to the extreme in a Season 7 episode called Enchanted Tiki Dreams. This entire episode is basically a love letter to Tiki culture. The story begins with Squidward being annoyed by SpongeBob and Patrick's loud behavior. Squidward fantasizes about being far away in a peaceful Tiki paradise. SpongeBob and Patrick overhear him and decide to surprise Squidward by building him a Tiki land in his backyard. They use cardboard, paper, and pipes to create an entire tropical island setting, complete with Tiki huts, Tiki statues, and tropical decorations. In Enchanted Tiki Dreams, Squidward initially loves his new Tiki paradise. He paints pictures of the scenery, he plays his clarinet, he dances with Tiki statues that come to life. The episode features several Hawaiian songs playing throughout, more densely packed than usual. Everything seems perfect until Patrick accidentally knocks over a Tiki torch and burns down the entire set. The episode shows how deeply Hawaiian and Tiki culture had become part of SpongeBob's identity. An entire episode could be built around these themes, because they were already present in every other episode. The choice to use Hawaiian music solved several practical problems for the show's creators. First, these songs were already recorded and available in music libraries. The show did not have to pay someone to compose hundreds of unique background tracks. They could license existing Hawaiian recordings and use them as needed. Second, Hawaiian music has a timeless quality. Songs recorded in the 1920s, 1950s, or 1990s all sound similar because they use traditional instruments and styles. This meant SpongeBob would not sound dated as years passed. A show using pop music or contemporary styles might feel old-fashioned after a decade. But Hawaiian music from any era works because it references traditions that are centuries old. Third, Hawaiian music is almost universally pleasant. It is hard to find people who actively dislike the sound of steel guitars and ukuleles playing cheerful melodies. The music works for all ages. Little kids enjoy the bright, happy sound. Teenagers and adults find it relaxing and unoffensive. Parents watching with their children do not get annoyed by the background music the way they might with more repetitive or irritating cartoon soundtracks. Fourth, the Hawaiian music helped establish Bikini Bottom as a place that exists outside of normal time and space. The show takes place underwater, which already separates it from the real world. But the music adds another layer of separation. We are not just underwater. We are in a tropical, timeless paradise where the normal rules do not apply. This makes all the absurd things that happen in SpongeBob feel more acceptable. Of course, a sponge can live in a pineapple and work at a fast food restaurant. Of course, a squirrel can live in a glass dome at the bottom of the ocean. The Hawaiian music tells us we are in a special place where imagination rules. The show's composer, Steve Belfer, and later composers like Sage Guyton and Jeremy Wakefield, understood how important the Hawaiian music was to SpongeBob's identity. When they did compose original music for specific scenes, they often incorporated Hawaiian instruments and styles. This created a seamless blend where viewers could not tell which music was vintage Hawaiian recordings and which was newly composed. Everything fit together into one unified sound. Over 25 years of episodes, the Hawaiian music has become as iconic as SpongeBob's laugh or Patrick's dumbness. Fans can hear just a few notes of steel guitar and immediately think of SpongeBob. The music has been featured in all 3 SpongeBob movies. It appears in the spin-off shows Camp Coral and The Patrick Star Show. It has been sampled in music by actual musicians who grew up watching SpongeBob. The Hawaiian tracks used in the show have introduced millions of children to Hawaiian culture and music who might never have heard it otherwise. There is something poetic about the whole situation. Hawaii is a real place with real history, real struggles, and real people. But to much of the world, Hawaii represents an imagined paradise, a tropical escape from everyday problems. SpongeBob does something similar with the ocean. The real ocean can be dark, cold, dangerous, and mysterious. But Bikini Bottom is bright, warm, friendly, and silly. Both Hawaii and Bikini Bottom exist as idealized versions of real places, spaces where our imaginations can play without limits. The Hawaiian music also connects SpongeBob to a larger tradition of animation. Classic cartoons from Warner Brothers and Disney often used exotic or ethnic music to create specific atmospheres. Bugs Bunny cartoons might suddenly feature Mexican mariachi music. Mickey Mouse Adventures might include African drums or Chinese instruments. These old cartoons were not always respectful in how they used other cultures' music, but they understood that different sounds create different feelings. SpongeBob continues this tradition while being much more respectful and appreciative of Hawaiian culture. Steven Hillenburg's decision to build SpongeBob's sound around Hawaiian music shows his attention to detail and his understanding of what makes a show memorable. He could have used generic cartoon music or contemporary pop songs. Instead, he chose something unexpected that perfectly fit his vision. That choice, made in the late 1990s during the show's development, has shaped every single episode made since then. Hundreds of episodes, thousands of scenes, and countless hours of entertainment all share this common musical foundation. The next time you watch SpongeBob, pay attention to the music playing in the background. Listen for the steel guitars, the ukuleles, the gentle island rhythms. Think about how different the show would feel with different music. Imagine SpongeBob with rock music, or jazz, or classical piano. It would not work. The Hawaiian music is not just background noise. It is part of what makes Bikini Bottom feel like home. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While the show's soundtrack transported viewers to a tropical paradise, the animation team was busy filling Bikini Bottom with another kind of culture, hiding references to some of history's most famous painters and their masterpieces in the most unexpected places. Section 5. Art History in Bikini Bottom. Famous paintings. Hidden in plain sight. Squidward Tentacles considers himself a serious artist. In nearly every episode that focuses on him, we see evidence of his creative ambitions. His house is filled wall to wall with paintings, sculptures, and artistic decorations. He takes art classes, teaches art classes, and constantly creates new pieces. But here is something most viewers miss. The SpongeBob animation team filled the show with references to real art history, hiding famous paintings and sculptures throughout Bikini Bottom. Some of these references are obvious parodies that anyone might catch. Others are subtle background details that only art students and museum visitors would recognize. Together, they create a running Easter egg that shows the writers had deep respect for art history, even while making jokes about Squidward's lack of talent. The most famous art reference in SpongeBob history appears in an episode called Artist Unknown from Season 2. This episode gives us the clearest look at art in Bikini Bottom, while also containing the most art history Easter eggs packed into a single story. The plot follows Squidward teaching an art class at the Adult Learning Center. He is excited to finally share his artistic knowledge with students who will appreciate his talents. SpongeBob shows up as one of the students, much to Squidward's annoyance. What follows is a story about artistic jealousy, natural talent, and one of the most memorable paintings in SpongeBob history. During the class, Squidward tries to teach the basic principles of art. He demonstrates different techniques and styles. The classroom walls are decorated with several paintings that students can use as inspiration. 2 of these paintings are direct references to famous artworks. One painting shows a farmer and his wife standing in front of a house holding a pitchfork. This is a parody of American Gothic, one of the most recognizable paintings in American art history. The original American Gothic was painted by Grant Wood in 1930. It shows a stern-looking farmer and his daughter standing in front of a house with a distinctive window. The painting has become a symbol of rural American life and values. The SpongeBob version replaces the humans with fish, but keeps the same composition and serious expressions. Another painting on the classroom wall shows a figure with arms and legs spread out, drawn inside a circle and square. This references Vitruvian Man, a famous drawing by Leonardo da Vinci from around 1490. Da Vinci was studying the proportions of the human body and how it relates to geometry. He drew a man with his arms and legs in 2 different positions, fitting perfectly into both a circle and a square. This drawing has become an icon of the Renaissance period and the connection between art and science. The SpongeBob version adapts this concept for underwater creatures, showing how, even in a silly cartoon, the animators were thinking about classical art. The episode Artist Unknown then introduces what might be the single most famous piece of art created within the SpongeBob universe, Bold and Brash. After failing to teach SpongeBob anything, Squidward decides to demonstrate advanced techniques. He sets up a canvas and begins painting frantically. He throws paint at the canvas, makes wild brush strokes, and creates something he considers a masterpiece. When Squidward reveals his finished painting, we see a strange image. The painting has a bright yellow background. In the center is a crude, naked drawing of Squidward. The figure is turquoise-colored and only has 4 limbs instead of Squidward's actual 6. The face looks distorted, and the whole thing has an aggressive, chaotic energy. Squidward proudly announces this painting as Bold and Brash. The name itself is a joke about how artists describe their work with grand, important-sounding phrases. But before Squidward can bask in his achievement, Monty P. Moneybags, an art collector visiting the class, looks at Bold and Brash and delivers the most savage art criticism in cartoon history. He says more like belongs in the trash. Then someone literally throws Bold and Brash into a garbage can. This scene became one of the most quoted moments in SpongeBob history. Bold and brash, more like belongs in the trash, turned into a meme used whenever someone wants to insult someone else's creative work. But beyond the joke, bold and brash is actually a reference to a real art movement. The painting style mimics abstract expressionism, a type of art that became popular in the 1940s and 1950s. Abstract expressionist painters like Jackson Pollock created works that did not look like real objects or people. Instead, they focused on colors, shapes, and the physical act of painting itself. Pollock was famous for dripping and throwing paint onto canvases laid on the floor, creating chaotic but intentional patterns. Squidward's Bold and Brash uses similar techniques to abstract expressionism, but fails to be good art. This is the joke. Squidward understands enough about art to copy the style of famous painters, but he does not understand what makes those paintings actually meaningful or beautiful. He can imitate the technique without capturing the spirit. This makes Bold and Brash a perfect symbol for Squidward's artistic struggles throughout the entire series. But the biggest art reference in Artist Unknown comes from SpongeBob himself. After watching Squidward struggle to teach marble sculpture, SpongeBob asks if he can try. Squidward hands him a large block of white marble and a mallet and chisel. These are tools used by sculptors to carve stone. Squidward demonstrates by hitting the marble over and over, but he only creates a pile of broken rocks. Then SpongeBob takes his turn. He strikes the marble exactly once with his mallet. The stone cracks and falls away, revealing a perfect sculpture of a human man standing in a relaxed pose. This sculpture is a recreation of David, one of the most famous sculptures in history. Michelangelo carved the original David from marble between 1501 and 1504. It shows the biblical hero David before his battle with the giant Goliath. The sculpture stands over 17 feet tall and is considered one of the greatest masterpieces of Renaissance art. Michelangelo captured incredible detail in the marble, from the muscles in David's body, to the veins in his hands, to the expression on his face. The statue represents the peak of human artistic achievement. SpongeBob creates a perfect copy of this masterpiece with one hit. Squidward is amazed and jealous. He cannot believe that SpongeBob, who seems silly and untalented, can create something so beautiful so easily. But SpongeBob does not even realize what he made. When Squidward refuses to praise the sculpture, SpongeBob assumes he did something wrong. He throws himself into a dumpster, saying he belongs in the trash just like his art. This moment works as both comedy and commentary on how we judge art and artists. Outside of Artist Unknown, other episodes contain art references scattered throughout. In an episode called Culture Shock, which aired in Season 1, Squidward organizes a talent show at the Krusty Krab. During one scene, we see a painting hanging on the wall that looks like a distorted screaming face done in bright colors. This is a reference to The Scream, painted by Edvard Munch in 1893. The original painting shows a figure with its hands on its face, mouth open in a scream, standing on a bridge with a swirling orange and red sky behind it. The painting represents anxiety and existential dread. The SpongeBob version transforms the screaming figure into a SpongeBob-shaped character, keeping the same disturbing energy, but making it underwater themed. The episode Wet Painters from Season 3 also contains an art reference. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick are hired to paint the inside of Mr. Krabs' house. Among the pictures on Mr. Krabs' walls, viewers can spot a painting that looks like colored rectangles and lines arranged in a geometric pattern. This painting style matches the work of Piet Mondrian, a Dutch painter who lived from 1872 to 1944. Mondrian became famous for paintings that used only straight lines and primary colors arranged in grid patterns. His work influenced modern art and design, including fashion and architecture. The SpongeBob version fits naturally on Mr. Krabs' wall, looking like decoration rather than a specific reference. But the largest collection of art references in SpongeBob does not come from any single episode. Instead, it comes from Squidward's house itself. Throughout the series, Squidward's home is shown filled with paintings, and most of them are self-portraits. Squidward has painted himself in seemingly every art style that exists. We see Squidward portraits done in realistic styles, abstract styles, cubism, impressionism, and surrealism. Some show Squidward as he actually looks. Others distort his features in creative ways. A few make him look noble and important. The sheer number of self-portraits makes a statement about Squidward's character. He is deeply focused on himself and his own image. This collection of self-portraits references a tradition in art history. Many famous painters created self-portraits throughout their careers. Vincent van Gogh painted over 30 self-portraits. Rembrandt created nearly 80 self-portraits across his lifetime. Pablo Picasso painted himself in various styles as his art evolved. These artists used self-portraits to experiment with techniques, document their lives, and explore their identities. Squidward does the same thing, except his self-portraits never sell and nobody appreciates them. This makes his art collection both sad and funny. An episode called Out of the Picture from season 10 plays with the idea of art value in a clever way. In this story, Mr. Krabs learns that artwork becomes more valuable after the artist dies or is out of the picture. He buys all of Squidward's paintings and then tries to get rid of Squidward to make the art worth more money. The episode fills the Krusty Krab with Squidward's various self-portraits, giving viewers a good look at his artistic range. We see paintings in different styles, sizes, and colors. Some are serious and dramatic. Others are experimental and strange. All of them feature Squidward. The interesting thing about Squidward as an artist character is that the show genuinely depicts him as talented in some ways. When he is creating art for himself, not trying to impress others or prove something, his work sometimes turns out well. The show suggests that Squidward's real problem is not lack of skill, but lack of inspiration and too much ego. He is so focused on being recognized as a great artist that he cannot create art that connects with people emotionally. The art references in SpongeBob serve multiple purposes. For younger viewers, they add visual interest and variety to the backgrounds. Kids do not need to know what American Gothic or Vitruvian Man are to enjoy the episodes. For older viewers and parents, spotting these references adds an extra layer of enjoyment. Adults who took art history classes or visited museums can feel smart when they recognize a reference. The show rewards knowledge without requiring it. These Easter eggs also establish SpongeBob as a show that respects intelligence and culture. The writers could have just put random paintings on walls without thinking about it. Instead, they chose to include real art history. This shows they cared about details and wanted to create a rich world. Bikini Bottom is not just a simple cartoon setting. It is a place with its own culture, including museums, art galleries, and citizens who create and appreciate art. The art references also make sense for Squidward's character. He is supposed to be the sophisticated one among the main characters. He plays clarinet, goes to museums, and considers himself above the childish behavior of SpongeBob and Patrick. Having real art references associated with Squidward makes his character more believable. We can see that he actually knows about art history, even if he cannot create masterpieces himself. Over 25 years of episodes, SpongeBob has continued adding art references. Some are subtle background details. Others are major plot points. Bold and Brash has reappeared several times after its introduction, always as a joke about bad art. SpongeBob's David sculpture gets mentioned in later episodes. The tradition continues of filling Squidward's house with paintings that reference real art styles and movements. For teachers, these Easter eggs have even become useful educational tools. Art teachers sometimes show SpongeBob clips to introduce students to famous artworks. Artist Unknown can start conversations about abstract expressionism, Renaissance sculpture, and how we judge art. Students are more interested in learning about David when they remember SpongeBob creating it with one hammer strike. The show accidentally became a gateway to art history education. The art Easter eggs in SpongeBob remind us that cartoons can be smart without being boring. They can include references to classical culture while still being silly and fun. A show about a talking sponge can teach viewers about Michelangelo and Edvard Munch without feeling like school. The references are there for people who want them, but never get in the way of enjoying the basic story. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While the SpongeBob animation team was busy hiding famous artworks throughout Bikini Bottom, they were also building something even more elaborate, a system of callbacks. and connections that would reward the most devoted fans who watched every single episode and remembered every tiny detail. Section 6. The Lost and Found. Seasons 9 to 10. Callback Treasure Trove. For the first 8 seasons of SpongeBob SquarePants, episodes mostly stood alone as individual stories. Sure, characters would reference events from earlier episodes occasionally, and running gags like "my leg" continued throughout the series. But the show did not spend much time looking backward at its own history. Then something changed. Starting in season 9, which aired in 2012, the animation team made a conscious decision to fill episodes with callbacks to the past. They began hiding items, characters, and references from classic episodes in the backgrounds of new stories. This created a treasure hunt for longtime fans who had been watching since the beginning. These Easter eggs rewarded viewers for their years of dedication, turning background details into love letters to the show's history. The shift happened for good reason. By season 9, SpongeBob had been on the air for over a decade. An entire generation had grown up watching the show. Kids who saw the first episode in 1999 were now adults in their 20s. Many of them still watched SpongeBob, either for nostalgia or because they genuinely enjoyed the humor. The animation team recognized this audience and decided to give them something special. They started treating Bikini Bottom like a real place with real history, where objects from past adventures did not just disappear, but stayed in the world, ready to be spotted by careful viewers. One of the earliest and most obvious examples of this new approach appeared in the season 9 episode Mall Girl Pearl. This episode follows Pearl, Mr. Krabs' teenage daughter, as she gets a job at the Bikini Bottom Mall. The mall itself is filled with stores, shops, and crowds of fish walking around shopping. The animation team took this opportunity to include dozens of characters from earlier seasons as background shoppers. These were not main characters like Patrick or Sandy. These were minor fish who had appeared in 1 or 2 classic episodes and then disappeared for years. Walking through the mall, eagle-eyed viewers could spot characters they had not seen since season 1 or season 2. There was Betsy Krabs, Mr. Krabs' mother, who had appeared in several early episodes. Karen, Plankton's computer wife, showed up shopping even though she rarely left the chum bucket. Dozens of other recognizable faces filled the background, creating a sense that all of Bikini Bottom had come to the mall that day. For fans who remembered these characters, seeing them again felt like reuniting with old friends. For casual viewers, they just looked like regular background fish. The Easter egg worked on multiple levels, but Mall Girl Pearl contained more than just character cameos. The episode also included visual references to past episodes. One scene shows graffiti on a wall behind the mall. The graffiti includes phrases like "Squidward smells" and other inappropriate words. This references Season 2's Sailor Mouth, an episode about SpongeBob and Patrick learning bad words from writing on a dumpster. In Sailor Mouth, SpongeBob reads similar graffiti behind the Krusty Krab. By including similar writing in Mall Girl Pearl, the animation team suggested that the same vandals were still active in Bikini Bottom years later. Another season 9 episode called Sharks vs. Pods took the callback concept even further. This episode involves SpongeBob joining different groups and getting caught up in their rivalry. But the real Easter eggs appear in SpongeBob's garage, which we see several times throughout the story. The garage is packed with items from SpongeBob's past adventures, each one carefully placed for fans to discover. Hanging on the wall in a frame is a spatula. Not just any spatula, but the specific golden spatula from the very first SpongeBob episode ever made. Help Wanted aired in 1999 and showed SpongeBob trying to get a job at the Krusty Krab. The episode is considered the beginning of everything. By showing that SpongeBob kept the spatula from that day and framed it like a precious memory, the show acknowledges its own origins. For fans who had been watching for 15 years by the time Sharks vs. Pods aired, seeing that spatula was deeply meaningful. The garage also contains a fake mustache with a small tag still attached. This references Season 3's SpongeBob Meets the Strangler, an episode where a criminal called the Tattletale Strangler disguises himself with a fake mustache to get close to SpongeBob. In Sharks vs. Pods, SpongeBob wears a similar fake mustache as part of his disguise. The tag suggests he bought it from the same place the Strangler shopped, or perhaps it is the actual mustache from that earlier adventure. Either way, it connects the new episode to an old favorite. Hanging on another wall is a license plate that reads IM-RDY. This is SpongeBob's catchphrase, "I'm ready," written in the style of a vanity license plate. The plate first appeared in Season 2's No Free Rides, an episode about SpongeBob finally getting his boating license and Mrs. Puff trying to steal it back. That episode showed the same license plate on SpongeBob's boat. Years later, SpongeBob apparently kept the plate and hung it in his garage as a memory of his achievement, even though he still cannot drive properly. The garage also features SpongeBob's bicycle, which has appeared in various early episodes. The bike looks old-fashioned and a bit beaten up, suggesting it has been through many adventures. Seeing it stored in the garage makes sense. SpongeBob probably does not ride it much anymore, but he kept it anyway because of sentimental value. Another Season 9 episode called Lame and Fortune adds even more callback items to SpongeBob's collection. In one scene, SpongeBob is sleeping in a boat that Mr. Krabs used for teaching him to drive. Inside the boat is a stuffed teddy bear. This bear first appeared in Season 4's Skill Crane, an episode where SpongeBob wins prizes from a claw machine game at the arcade. The first prize he wins is this exact teddy bear, which becomes very important to the plot of that episode. Years later, SpongeBob still has the bear and even sleeps with it, showing his attachment to meaningful objects. That same episode features a scene in an arcade. If you look carefully at the arcade games in the background, one of them features Jeffrey the jellyfish. Jeffrey appeared in Season 2's I'm Your Biggest Fanatic, an episode about SpongeBob meeting his hero at a jellyfishing convention. Jeffrey is the king of the jellyfish in that episode. The arcade game suggests that Jeffrey became famous enough to get his own video game, or at least to be featured in one. Lame and Fortune also includes a fishing scene that mirrors Season 6's Sponge Hinge. In Sponge Hinge, Mr. Krabs uses a fishing rod to try to catch SpongeBob. In Lame and Fortune, Plankton uses a fishing rod in exactly the same way to retrieve SpongeBob. The scene is set up almost identically, with similar camera angles and even similar dialogue. This is not just a callback, but a deliberate recreation of an earlier moment, showing that the writers remembered specific scenes from episodes that aired years before. By Season 10, which began in 2017, the callback Easter eggs had become a regular part of the show's DNA. An episode from that season shows SpongeBob's house cluttered with items from his past. The scene looks like someone took a greatest hits collection of SpongeBob props and scattered them around his living room. Each item tells a story to viewers who remember where it came from. The magic conch shell sits prominently on a shelf. This shell first appeared in Season 3's Club SpongeBob, where SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward get lost in the kelp forest. SpongeBob and Patrick rely on the magic conch to make all their decisions, asking it questions and following whatever it says. The shell becomes a source of frustration for Squidward, but ultimately saves them. Years later, SpongeBob still owns the shell, presumably still asking it for advice. Next to the magic conch is a soda drinking hat marked as number 1. This hat appeared in Season 3's One Krabs Trash, an episode where Mr. Krabs sells SpongeBob a worthless soda drinking hat, only to discover it is actually a rare collector's item worth thousands of dollars. Mr. Krabs spends the rest of the episode trying to get the hat back. In the end, it turns out thousands of these hats exist, making them worthless again. But SpongeBob kept his hat anyway, displaying it proudly regardless of its financial value. Hanging on the wall is a glove balloon, the same one SpongeBob received in Season 1's Rock Bottom. In that episode, SpongeBob gets stuck in Rock Bottom, a deep and creepy part of the ocean. A friendly creature gives him a balloon to cheer him up. That balloon plays a role in SpongeBob eventually escaping Rock Bottom. The fact that SpongeBob kept this balloon for years, even though balloons usually pop or deflate, shows how much that adventure meant to him. A fishhook hangs somewhere in the room, referencing Season 1's Hooky. That episode taught SpongeBob about the dangers of fishhooks through a story that was genuinely tense and scary for a kids' show. Mr. Krabs warns SpongeBob that fishhooks are deadly traps. SpongeBob learns his lesson the hard way. Keeping a fishhook as a souvenir seems strange and slightly dark, but it represents an important learning experience for SpongeBob. SpongeBob's F-U-N ukulele also appears in the house. This small instrument was featured in Season 1's F-U-N, an episode where SpongeBob tries to teach Plankton about friendship through a song. The song F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me became one of the most memorable musical moments in the show's history. The ukulele SpongeBob played during that song apparently became a keepsake. The board game Eels and Escalators sits on a shelf or table. This game appeared in Season 2's Sailor Mouth, the same episode referenced by the mall graffiti. In Sailor Mouth, SpongeBob and Patrick play Eels and Escalators while waiting to start work. The game works like snakes and ladders, where you try to reach the top while avoiding obstacles. The game reappears in multiple later episodes, becoming a recurring element of SpongeBob's home entertainment collection. These items continue appearing across multiple Season 10 episodes. One episode shows SpongeBob and Patrick playing various board games to pass the time. In addition to Eels and Escalators, they pull out Whirly Brain, which references the episode Whirly Brains. They play Pretzel Pals from Buried in Time, and a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy paddleball set from Have You Seen This Snail? They break Out Patrick, the game, which is literally the plot of an episode called Patrick, the Game. They play Pin the Tail on the Seahorse from Opposite Day, and the Flying Dutchman's Treasure Hunt from the episode Arg. This scene is remarkable because it shows the writers keeping track of every board game and toy ever mentioned in any episode. They compiled them all and presented them as part of SpongeBob's actual game collection. It transforms throwaway jokes and plot devices from individual episodes into real objects that exist in Bikini Bottom continuously. Even more impressively, one episode shows SpongeBob eating Kelpo cereal for breakfast. Kelpo appeared way back in Season 1 as Bikini Bottom's generic cereal brand. Decades later, the show still remembers this detail. In the same episode, SpongeBob and Patrick eat Krusty Krab pizza, referencing the classic Season 1 episode Pizza Delivery, where they had to deliver a pizza across dangerous terrain. One of the cleverest callbacks is not even related to SpongeBob specifically. In one Season 9 episode, Plankton gets stepped on by a customer and temporarily turns into a splat shape on the floor. The shape he makes looks exactly like Nickelodeon's old orange splat logo from the 1980s and 1990s. This is not just a SpongeBob reference, but a reference to the network that airs the show. It acknowledges Nickelodeon's history while making a visual joke. These Seasons 9 and 10. Easter eggs represent a shift in how SpongeBob approached its own continuity. Earlier seasons treated each episode as mostly separate from others. Later seasons started building a shared universe where everything connects. Objects do not disappear after one episode. They become part of the world. Characters do not vanish. They keep existing in Bikini Bottom, shopping at the mall, or walking past in backgrounds. This approach rewards longtime fans while not punishing new viewers. Someone watching SpongeBob for the first time does not need to know what the magic conch shell is to enjoy the episode it appears in. But someone who has watched every episode gets extra joy from spotting it. The show becomes richer the more you know, without becoming confusing if you know nothing. The callbacks also make Bikini Bottom feel more real. In real life, people keep souvenirs from important experiences. They display meaningful objects in their homes. They hold on to things that remind them of good times. SpongeBob does the same thing, which makes him feel like a real person with real memories rather than just a cartoon character. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While the show filled SpongeBob's home with treasures from the past, the writing team was also busy weaving family connections throughout the series, sometimes creating new relatives entirely by accident when voice actors decided to improvise during recording sessions. Section 7. Uncle Sherm, the improvised family member. SpongeBob SquarePants has introduced viewers to many members of the SquarePants family over the years. We have met SpongeBob's parents, Harold and Margaret SquarePants, who appear regularly throughout the series. We have seen his grandmother, Grandma SquarePants, who loves baking cookies and treating SpongeBob like a little kid. We have even met various ancestors and distant relatives through flashbacks and special episodes. But one family member has a particularly interesting origin story. Uncle Sherm exists purely because voice actor Tom Kenny made up a name during a recording session. The writers loved it enough to keep it in the episode, and years later, they decided to make him an official part of SpongeBob's family tree. This Easter egg shows how creative accidents can become permanent parts of a show's history. The story begins with a Season 3 episode called Crab Borg. This episode aired in 2002 and follows a simple but funny plot. SpongeBob watches a scary robot movie late at night before going to bed. The movie is about robots who look like normal people but are actually evil machines planning to take over the world. The movie terrifies SpongeBob so much that he cannot sleep. He lies awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, worrying that anyone he knows could secretly be a robot in disguise. His imagination runs wild as he considers all the possibilities. In the morning, SpongeBob arrives at the Krusty Krab, still paranoid about robots. When he sees Mr. Krabs reading the morning paper, SpongeBob notices something that seems suspicious. The paper has a story about a robot, and Mr. Krabs is reading it carefully. SpongeBob's tired, worried brain immediately jumps to a conclusion. What if Mr. Krabs is a robot? What if the robot movie was not fiction, but a warning? SpongeBob becomes convinced that Mr. Krabs has been replaced by an evil robot duplicate. Before confronting Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob lies in bed worrying and lists various people who might be robots. This is where the improvisation happens. The script probably just said something like, SpongeBob lists people who could be robots, without specifying exact names. Tom Kenny, voicing SpongeBob's paranoid rambling, had to come up with a list of potential robot suspects. He mentions Patrick, he mentions Sandy, he mentions Squidward, and then in a moment of pure creative improvisation, Tom Kenny says, what if Uncle Sherm is a robot? Uncle Sherm. Not an uncle we had ever met or heard about before. Not a character who had appeared in any previous episode. Just a name that Tom Kenny pulled out of nowhere during the recording session. In that moment, Uncle Sherm was born, created entirely by accident during voice acting. The directors and editors listening to the recording must have found this funny, because they kept the line in the final episode. They did not ask Tom Kenny to redo it with a different name. They did not cut it out. Uncle Sherm made it into the episode that aired on television. When fans watched Crab Borg, they heard SpongeBob worry about Uncle Sherm being a robot, and naturally they wondered, who is Uncle Sherm? When did SpongeBob get an Uncle Sherm? Why have we never seen him? The answer to where the name came from is simple. Tom Kenny later revealed in interviews that he named Uncle Sherm after Sherm Cohen. Sherm Cohen was a storyboard supervisor who worked on Crab Borg and many other SpongeBob episodes. A storyboard supervisor helps plan out how each scene in an episode will look. They draw rough sketches showing the camera angles, character positions, and action sequences. The storyboard is like a comic book version of the episode that the animators use as a guide. Sherm Cohen was one of the key people helping create the visual storytelling of SpongeBob during its early seasons. Tom Kenny apparently liked Sherm Cohen and found his name amusing. When Kenny needed to improvise a random family member for SpongeBob, the name Sherm popped into his head. He added Uncle to make it sound like a relative. And just like that, Uncle Sherm became part of SpongeBob canon, even though he was really just Tom Kenny making a joke about a crew member. This kind of improvisation is actually common in animation voice recording, but most improvised lines do not stick around. Voice actors are encouraged to try different line readings and sometimes add their own ideas. The directors then choose which version works best for the final episode. Most attempts at improvisation get cut or replaced, but occasionally, an improvised moment is so perfect that it becomes permanent. Uncle Sherm is a perfect example of successful improvisation that nobody planned. For several years after Crab Borg aired, Uncle Sherm remained a mystery. He was mentioned once and never appeared on screen. Fans discussed him on message boards and wikis, trying to figure out where he fit in the SquarePants family. Some fans assumed it was just a throwaway line that meant nothing. Others believed the writers would eventually introduce Uncle Sherm properly in a future episode. The truth was somewhere in between. The SpongeBob writing team liked having Uncle Sherm as a background character. They decided to make him official by connecting him to another new character. In Season 5, an episode called Stanley S. SquarePants introduced SpongeBob's cousin Stanley. Stanley is clumsy and accidentally destroys everything he touches. He comes to stay with SpongeBob because Stanley's father sent him away. The episode reveals that Stanley's father is Uncle Sherm, making Uncle Sherm officially SpongeBob's uncle and Stanley's father. However, Uncle Sherm still does not appear in person during Stanley S. SquarePants. We only see photographs of him. The episode shows Stanley looking at a family photo that includes Uncle Sherm, but we only get glimpses. Uncle Sherm exists in the SpongeBob universe now, but he remains mostly mysterious. We know he is real, we know he has a son named Stanley, and we know he is related to SpongeBob, but we have never seen him walk around or talk or do anything active. This makes Uncle Sherm a unique type of character. He exists purely through references and photographs. He is important enough to be part of the family tree, but not important enough to actually appear in episodes. It is like having a relative you hear about at family gatherings but never actually meet. Everyone knows Uncle Sherm exists, but nobody spends time with him. This weird status makes Uncle Sherm one of the most unusual Easter eggs in the show. He is simultaneously canon and invisible. The Uncle Sherm story teaches us important lessons about how animated shows are made. First, it shows that not everything is carefully planned from the beginning. The SpongeBob writers did not sit down and create a detailed SquarePants family tree before the show started. They invented relatives as needed, sometimes making them up on the spot. Second, it proves that collaboration between voice actors and writers can create unexpected but valuable additions to a show. Tom Kenny's improvisation gave the writers a new character they had not thought of, which they later developed into something meaningful. Third, the Uncle Sherm situation demonstrates how shows can turn accidents into canon. The writers could have ignored the Uncle Sherm reference and pretended it never happened. Instead, they embraced it. They found a way to make Uncle Sherm real within the show's universe. This shows respect for their own continuity, even when that continuity was created by mistake. Uncle Sherm is not the only improvised element that became part of SpongeBob. The entire My Leg running gag started as Doug Lawrence improvising background screams, as we discussed earlier. The specific delivery and personality of many characters came from voice actors trying different approaches and stumbling onto something that worked perfectly. SpongeBob's distinctive laugh, with its high-pitched ah-ha-ha-ha sound, developed through Tom Kenny experimenting during recording sessions. Patrick's dumb but lovable personality came partly from Bill Fagerbakk's improvisational choices about how to play the character. The creative environment of SpongeBob allowed for this kind of experimentation. Steven Hillenburg, who created the show, trusted his team. He gave voice actors freedom to try new things. He let writers and animators contribute ideas. This collaborative atmosphere meant that good ideas could come from anywhere, not just from the person officially in charge. Uncle Sherm benefited from this creative openness. In many animated shows, the scripts are locked down completely before recording begins. Voice actors simply read exactly what is written with no room for changes. This approach ensures consistency and prevents problems, but it also means losing the spontaneous magic that can happen when talented performers are allowed to play. SpongeBob found a balance. The scripts provided structure and story, but voice actors could add personality and surprise moments within that structure. The fact that Uncle Sherm came specifically from Sherm Cohen's name adds another layer to the story. SpongeBob has always included references to its creators and crew members. Buildings in Bikini Bottom are sometimes named after writers. Background characters occasionally resemble animators. The end credits sometimes include inside jokes. By immortalizing Sherm Cohen as Uncle Sherm, the show honored one of the people who helped make it successful. Sherm Cohen worked on SpongeBob during its most important early years, helping establish the visual style and storytelling approach that made the show special. Having a character named after him, even a character who never really appears, is a lasting tribute. For fans who know the Uncle Sherm origin story, rewatching Crabborg becomes more interesting. That casual mention of Uncle Sherm transforms from a random line into a significant moment in SpongeBob history. It is the birth of a character, even though nobody knew it at the time. Tom Kenny was just goofing around, making up a silly name, and accidentally created a permanent piece of the show's mythology. The Uncle Sherm Easter egg is different from most others we have discussed. It is not visual. You cannot spot it in the background of a scene. It is not a reference to another work of art or a piece of pop culture. Instead, it is a piece of meta-knowledge about how the show was made. The Easter egg is knowing that Uncle Sherm should not exist at all, that he is a happy accident preserved for eternity. Some fans have speculated about whether Uncle Sherm will ever appear in a future episode. Would the show finally give him a voice and personality? Would we learn more about his relationship with SpongeBob? Or will Uncle Sherm remain forever in the background, mentioned but never seen, a mysterious figure known only through photos and occasional references? As of now, Uncle Sherm has maintained his invisible status. The show seems content to let him exist as a legend rather than an active character. This approach actually makes Uncle Sherm more interesting. If he appeared in an episode, he would become just another character. By staying hidden, he remains special. He is the family member we know about but do not really know. He is evidence that the SquarePants family extends beyond what we see on screen. He represents all the unseen parts of Bikini Bottom, the parts that exist in the background of the world, but never become the focus of stories. Uncle Sherm also proves that even tiny details in SpongeBob can have interesting stories behind them. A single throwaway line in one episode, created without planning or purpose, became a recurring element of the show's canon. This encourages fans to pay attention to everything, because you never know which random moment might become important later. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The existence of Uncle Sherm, born from a moment of voice actor improvisation and named after a crew member, shows the creative chaos that can produce great entertainment. But while some Easter eggs come from spontaneous accidents, others are carefully planned, appearing over and over with such precision that fans could set their watches by them, particularly when that Easter egg is a specific number that haunts Squidward wherever he goes. Section 8, the number 11, Bikini Bottom's recurring joke. Every television show has certain restrictions it must work within. These restrictions come from how television networks schedule their programming and sell advertising time. One of the most important restrictions for animated cartoons is episode length. Most animated shows on Nickelodeon run for exactly 11 minutes. This is not a random choice or an artistic decision. It is a practical requirement based on how television time slots work. But the writers of SpongeBob SquarePants decided to turn this restriction into a joke. They began hiding the number 11 throughout the show, making references to the fact that episodes last exactly 11 minutes, and creating situations where 11 appears in ways that make fans laugh when they notice the pattern. This Easter egg is not about finding hidden objects or spotting references to other works. Instead, it is about the show acknowledging its own existence as a television program with specific time limits. To understand why episodes are 11 minutes long, we need to understand how television scheduling works. When you watch a show on Nickelodeon or any cable network, you are not just watching the show. You are also watching commercials for toys, movies, snacks, and other products. These commercials pay for the show to exist. The network needs to fit both the show and the commercials into neat time blocks that make scheduling easy. The standard time block for kids' programming is 30 minutes. But 30 minutes is too long for one story, especially for younger viewers who have shorter attention spans. So networks divide that 30 minutes into smaller pieces. A typical 30-minute block on Nickelodeon works like this. You get about 11 minutes of one cartoon episode. Then you get 2 to 3 minutes of commercials. Then you get another 11 minutes featuring either a second episode of the same show or an episode of a different show. Then you get more commercials. And then sometimes there are brief announcements about what is coming up next on the channel. When you add all these pieces together, you get exactly 30 minutes. This format has been standard for animated shows since the 1960s. The Flintstones, Scooby-Doo, He-Man, Rugrats, and thousands of other cartoons all followed this pattern. SpongeBob fits perfectly into this system. Each episode of SpongeBob runs for approximately 11 minutes from the moment the title card appears to the moment the episode ends. Some episodes are slightly shorter, maybe 10 minutes and 45 seconds. Others are slightly longer, perhaps 11 minutes and 15 seconds. But the target length is always 11 minutes. This has been true since the very first episode aired in 1999 and continues to be true in new episodes today. Most shows never mention their own episode length. They pretend that the stories exist in a real world where time works normally. But SpongeBob takes a different approach. The writers, especially in later seasons, started making jokes about the fact that the show lasts exactly 11 minutes. They broke what is called the fourth wall, which means acknowledging that the characters are in a TV show rather than pretending everything is real. These moments of self-awareness create humor for viewers who understand what is happening. One of the clearest examples appears in an episode called Patty Caper. In this episode, SpongeBob tells a long, complicated story about what happened earlier in the day. The story goes on and on with lots of details and side explanations. When SpongeBob finally finishes talking, a waitress who has been listening responds with, "Well, you managed to kill 11 minutes." This line is hilarious because it is literally true. SpongeBob's story took up most of the episode's running time. The waitress is not just commenting on how long the story felt. She is pointing out that the story filled exactly the amount of time the episode needed to fill. The joke works on two levels. Characters in the story think the waitress is just being sarcastic about SpongeBob's long-windedness. But viewers who catch the reference understand that the show is winking at them, acknowledging that episodes last 11 minutes. Another famous example comes from the Season 1 episode Nature Pants. In this story, SpongeBob decides he wants to live in the wild with jellyfish instead of living in his pineapple house and working at the Krusty Krab. He gives away all his possessions and says goodbye to his friends. Squidward, who is usually annoyed by SpongeBob, is thrilled to finally be rid of him. As SpongeBob walks away to start his new life, Squidward makes a bet with himself. He says he does not think SpongeBob will last more than 11 minutes living with the jellyfish. This is funny because Squidward is accidentally correct. The episode itself lasts about 11 minutes, and by the end of that time, SpongeBob has given up on living in nature and returned home. Squidward's prediction matches the exact length of the episode. These two examples are the most obvious references to 11 minutes in SpongeBob. But the number 11 appears throughout the series in more subtle ways. Clocks in the background sometimes show 11 o'clock. Signs on buildings might have the number 11 on them. License plates on boats occasionally display 11. Characters mention 11 when talking about quantities or measurements. The animators and writers scattered the number throughout episodes as an inside joke for fans who were paying close attention. The use of 11 as a recurring number serves several purposes. First, it rewards fans who watch carefully. Someone casually watching SpongeBob might never notice that 11 appears more often than other numbers. But dedicated fans who study episodes frame by frame can spot these references. Finding the number 11 becomes a game, similar to finding hidden Mickeys at Disney theme parks. Second, it creates a sense of connection between the show and its audience. When viewers realize the show is making jokes about its own format, they feel like they are in on the secret. The show is not just entertaining them, it is talking to them, acknowledging that they understand how television works. Third, these meta-jokes add a layer of sophistication to SpongeBob's humor. The show works perfectly well for young children who do not notice or understand the 11-minute references. Kids can enjoy the slapstick comedy, silly voices, and colorful animation without ever thinking about episode length. But older viewers and adults watching with their children get an extra joke. This multi-layered approach to humor is part of why SpongeBob succeeded with audiences of all ages. Everyone finds something to laugh at, but not everyone is laughing at the same things. The number 11 also appears in ways that have nothing to do with episode length, but contribute to making 11 feel like Bikini Bottom's lucky or unlucky number. In some episodes, characters have 11 of something. Buildings might be 11 stories tall. Prices might cost $11. Distances might be 11 miles. Not every appearance of 11 is a reference to episode length. Sometimes the writers just used 11 because it had become a running gag. Once you establish that a particular number is significant in your show, you can keep using it for different reasons. The number takes on a life of its own. This technique of using a recurring number is not unique to SpongeBob. Many shows have lucky numbers or numbers that appear repeatedly. Lost famously used the numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42 throughout its entire run. The Simpsons uses specific prices like $8.50 repeatedly, but SpongeBob's use of 11 is particularly clever because it is self-referential. The number exists in the show because of a real-world restriction on how long episodes can be. By turning that restriction into a joke, the writers demonstrated creative problem-solving. The 11-minute format itself has advantages and disadvantages for storytelling. The advantage is that stories must be tight and efficient. Every scene needs to serve a purpose. There is no room for wasted time or unnecessary subplots. This forces writers to be creative and focused. They cannot rely on filler content to pad out the episode. The disadvantage is that some stories feel rushed. Complex plots with multiple characters and storylines are hard to fit into 11 minutes. Character development happens more slowly because there is less time to explore feelings and motivations in each episode. SpongeBob handles these limitations well by keeping stories relatively simple. Most episodes focus on one clear situation. SpongeBob wants to pass his driving test. Patrick gets a new job. Squidward tries to prove he is better than Squilliam. The show rarely attempts elaborate multi-part stories or complicated mysteries that require careful attention across multiple episodes. Each story begins and ends within its 11-minute window. This makes SpongeBob easy to watch casually. You can miss several episodes and still understand what is happening when you tune in again. However, SpongeBob occasionally breaks from the 11-minute format for special episodes. Some stories are doubled in length, taking up the full 22-minute time slot that would normally contain 2 separate episodes. These longer episodes usually tell more ambitious stories. The first SpongeBob movie, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, runs for over 80 minutes, showing that the characters and world can support longer storytelling when needed. But the core series sticks to 11 minutes because that format has worked successfully for over 2 decades. The 11-minute Easter egg also reminds us that SpongeBob exists in the tradition of self-aware cartoons. Shows like Animaniacs, The Simpsons, and Looney Tunes frequently broke the fourth wall and made jokes about being cartoons. Characters would talk to the audience, comment on the animation process, or acknowledge that they were not real. SpongeBob uses this technique more subtly than those shows. SpongeBob does not constantly remind viewers that it is a cartoon, but occasional moments like the "kill 11 minutes" joke show that the creators understand the tradition they are working in. For fans who create content about SpongeBob online, the 11-minute format has become important trivia. Fan wikis document exactly how long each episode runs. Video compilation creators carefully time their montages. People making analysis videos about the show reference the 11-minute restriction when discussing story structure. The format has become part of SpongeBob's identity, as recognizable as the Pineapple House or Krabby Patties. The number 11 might be the most unusual Easter egg in this entire list. It is not a visual image hidden in the background. It is not a reference to another work of art or pop culture. It is not a recurring character or joke. Instead, it is a number that represents the show's relationship with television as a medium. Every time 11 appears, it is a small reminder that SpongeBob exists within certain rules and constraints. But rather than hide those constraints, the show celebrates them. The writers took a limitation and turned it into a feature. As SpongeBob continues producing new episodes, the 11-minute format remains standard. Streaming services like Netflix and Paramount Plus could theoretically allow episodes of any length, free from the commercial break structure that created the 11-minute rule in the first place. But SpongeBob sticks with 11 minutes because it works. The format is familiar to fans. It allows for efficient storytelling, and it maintains the tradition that has defined the show for over 25 years. The number 11 will likely continue appearing in clever ways as long as SpongeBob continues airing. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While the writers carefully planted the number 11 throughout Bikini Bottom to remind viewers about episode length, they also included something much more personal, literally putting the face of the man who brings SpongeBob to life into one of the show's most memorable food items. Section 9, Tom Kenny's face on the volcano sauce. Voice actors live in a strange world. They bring characters to life, making them sound real and giving them personality. But most people never see their faces. A voice actor can be wildly famous for their work while walking down the street completely unrecognized. Children who love SpongeBob SquarePants and can quote every line he says might have no idea what Tom Kenny looks like. They know SpongeBob's voice perfectly, but Tom Kenny himself remains invisible. This makes it particularly special when the SpongeBob animation team decided to include Tom Kenny's actual face in an episode, not as a character he voices, but as himself, appearing on a bottle of extremely hot sauce that is about to torture SpongeBob's tongue. This Easter egg is personal, funny, and represents the deep connection between the show and the man who gives SpongeBob his voice. The Easter egg appears in a Season 1 episode called Karate Choppers. This episode originally aired in 1999 during SpongeBob's first season, making it one of the earliest hidden tributes to the show's cast. The story follows SpongeBob and Sandy as they practice karate together. Both of them love martial arts and enjoy sparring with each other. However, their karate battles keep interfering with SpongeBob's work at the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob becomes so obsessed with karate that he starts seeing potential attacks everywhere. He thinks customers are trying to karate chop him. He karate chops food and kitchen equipment. His karate obsession is disrupting the restaurant. Mr. Krabs gets fed up with SpongeBob's karate distraction and gives him an order. SpongeBob must choose between karate and his job at the Krusty Krab. He cannot do both anymore. SpongeBob reluctantly chooses his job and promises to give up karate forever. He tells Sandy that they cannot spar anymore because he needs to focus on being a fry cook. Sandy is disappointed, but understands. However, Sandy does not really accept SpongeBob's decision. She thinks he is making a mistake by giving up something he loves. She decides to push SpongeBob until he cannot resist fighting back. Sandy starts ambushing SpongeBob throughout the day. She jumps out from hiding places and tries to get him to karate chop her. SpongeBob keeps refusing and running away. He is determined to keep his promise to Mr. Krabs, but Sandy is persistent. She follows him around Bikini Bottom, constantly challenging him to fight. The chase and the temptation become too much for SpongeBob. Eventually, he gives in and agrees to one more karate match with Sandy. This is where the volcano sauce comes into play. During their karate battle, Sandy pulls out a bottle of extremely spicy hot sauce called volcano sauce. The bottle itself is bright red with flames on the label, suggesting extreme heat. Sandy threatens to pour this sauce on SpongeBob's tongue as part of their karate game. SpongeBob looks terrified because he knows how painful this will be. The camera zooms in on the bottle of volcano sauce, and we get a clear look at the label. On the label, there is a face. This face is not a cartoon character. It is not animated in the style of SpongeBob. Instead, it is a real photograph of a real person, edited to look slightly cartoonish, but still clearly a real human face. The face has a mischievous, taunting expression. It looks directly at the camera, which means it is looking directly at SpongeBob, who is staring at the bottle in fear. The face even moves. It laughs at SpongeBob in a mean, mocking way, as if the hot sauce itself is excited about causing pain. That face belongs to Tom Kenny. The man who provides SpongeBob's voice is literally on the label of the hot sauce that is about to hurt SpongeBob. This creates a funny and strange situation. Tom Kenny is essentially taunting himself. SpongeBob is looking at the face of the man who gives him life, not knowing that this face belongs to his creator. It is a moment of meta humor that most viewers completely miss because they have no idea what Tom Kenny looks like. Tom Kenny is one of the most successful voice actors in the entertainment industry. He has voiced hundreds of characters across dozens of shows and movies. Before SpongeBob, he worked on shows like Rocko's Modern Life, where he voiced several characters. He has appeared in live-action shows and movies as an actual on-screen actor. But his greatest achievement is undoubtedly SpongeBob SquarePants. Tom Kenny has voiced SpongeBob in every single episode since 1999. He has voiced SpongeBob in all the movies, video games, theme park attractions, and commercials. His voice is SpongeBob. The two are inseparable. Steven Hillenburg, who created SpongeBob, specifically wanted Tom Kenny for the role. Hillenburg remembered Kenny's work on Rocko's Modern Life, where Kenny had used a high-pitched, enthusiastic voice for a minor character. When Hillenburg was developing SpongeBob, He thought of that voice and asked Kinney to recreate it. Kinney initially forgot how he had done the voice because it was such a small role years earlier. Hillenburg played him a clip of the old Rocco episode to remind him. When Kinney performed the voice again, Hillenburg knew immediately that he had found his SpongeBob. The relationship between Tom Kinney and SpongeBob goes deeper than just voice acting. Kinney helped develop the character's personality through his performance choices. The way SpongeBob laughs, the way he says certain phrases, the enthusiasm in his voice during happy moments, and the sadness in his voice during emotional scenes all come from Kinney's instincts as a performer. SpongeBob's voice is not just reading lines. It is a complete characterization created through tone, rhythm, timing, and feeling. Tom Kinney also voices several other characters in SpongeBob. He provides the voice for Gary the snail, though Gary only says meow in different ways. Kinney voices the French narrator who introduces mini episodes with dramatic descriptions of life under the sea. He plays Patchy the Pirate, a live-action character who appears in special episodes and loves SpongeBob. Kinney even voices minor background characters when needed. This means Tom Kinney is essentially talking to himself in many scenes. SpongeBob and Gary have conversations where Kinney voices both sides. Given how important Tom Kinney is to SpongeBob's success, it makes sense that the animation team would want to honor him somehow. But voice actors rarely get visual recognition in animated shows. They work in recording booths, usually alone or with just one or two other actors. They never appear on screen. Their names appear in the end credits, but most viewers do not watch credits or remember the names they see there. Voice acting is a job that operates in the shadows, creating magic that viewers experience without knowing where it comes from. Including Tom Kinney's face on the volcano sauce label is a way of saying thank you. It acknowledges that Tom Kinney is essential to the show. It gives him a moment of visibility in a medium where he is usually invisible, and it does so in a funny, appropriate way that fits the scene perfectly. The hot sauce is supposed to be intimidating and scary to SpongeBob. Having a real human face laughing at him from the label makes it more unsettling in a comedic way. The choice works both as an Easter egg for fans who recognize Tom Kinney and as a funny visual gag for viewers who do not know who he is. The tradition of creators appearing in their own work has a long history in entertainment. Movie directors often give themselves small cameos in their films. Alfred Hitchcock appeared briefly in almost every movie he directed. Stan Lee appeared in every Marvel movie before he died. Animators and artists sometimes hide their faces or names in their work. Disney animators would occasionally draw themselves as background characters. The Simpsons has featured many of its writers and producers as animated versions of themselves. These cameos serve as signatures, ways for creators to leave their mark on their creations. Tom Kinney's appearance on the volcano sauce label follows this tradition. It is his signature hidden in plain sight. Most viewers never notice it because they do not know what Tom Kinney looks like. But for fans who have seen interviews with Tom Kinney or looked him up online, spotting his face on the hot sauce is a delightful surprise. It rewards curiosity and makes fans feel connected to the real people who make the show. The volcano sauce Easter egg has been rated highly by fans who know about it, on websites that collect Easter eggs from various shows and movies. The volcano sauce face scores around 9.0 out of 10. Fans appreciate the cleverness of the reference and the fact that it is genuinely difficult to spot unless you are looking for it. The face appears on screen for only a few seconds. It is shown during a tense, funny moment where viewers are focused on the action and SpongeBob's reactions. Most people watching the scene for the first time are not studying the hot sauce label carefully. They are watching SpongeBob panic. This is what makes a good Easter egg. It does not interrupt the story or draw too much attention to itself. The scene works perfectly, whether you notice Tom Kinney's face or not. If you do not spot it, the scene is still funny because a hot sauce label with an evil face is amusing. If you do spot it and recognize Tom Kinney, the scene becomes even funnier because of the added layer of meaning. The Easter egg enhances the experience without being necessary for enjoyment. Discovering this Easter egg usually happens in one of two ways. Some fans learn about it by reading online forums, wikis, or articles like this one. Someone points it out, and then they go back and watch the episode again to see for themselves. Other fans discover it by accident while watching the episode closely, perhaps while taking screenshots or studying scenes frame by frame. The moment of realization is exciting either way. Suddenly, a scene you have watched many times reveals something new. The volcano sauce moment also reflects Tom Kenny's sense of humor. He is known among SpongeBob fans for being funny, humble, and genuinely appreciative of the show's success. He does not take himself too seriously. He is happy to make jokes about himself and his work. Having his face appear as a taunting hot sauce label fits his personality perfectly. He is essentially pranking himself and SpongeBob at the same time. Over the years, Tom Kenny has talked about SpongeBob in interviews, conventions, and podcasts. He always speaks about the character with love and respect. He understands how important SpongeBob is to people. He knows that children grew up with this voice in their lives, that SpongeBob helped people through difficult times, and that the character means something special to millions of fans. Kenny takes this responsibility seriously while still having fun with it. The volcano sauce Easter egg is just one example of how SpongeBob honors its creators. Other episodes include references to writers, animators, and producers. Buildings in Bikini Bottom are sometimes named after crew members. Background characters occasionally resemble real people who work on the show. The end credits sometimes contain hidden jokes or messages. SpongeBob has always been a show that values the people who make it, not just the characters who appear on screen. For Tom Kenny, appearing on a hot sauce label in Season 1 was probably a small fun moment during the show's early days. Nobody knew in 1999 that SpongeBob would become one of the most successful cartoons in history. Nobody predicted that the show would still be making new episodes 25 years later. That little Easter egg from Season 1 has now been seen by hundreds of millions of people around the world, even though most of them never noticed it. It has become a permanent part of SpongeBob history, a tiny tribute to the man whose voice defines the character. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While Tom Kenny's face appeared on a hot sauce bottle as a hidden tribute to SpongeBob's voice, the show was simultaneously building another kind of hidden story, one that poked fun at television itself and the way networks marketed their shows to hungry audiences. Section 10. The Lost Episode. Marketing Parody. In the early days of television, before streaming services and digital recordings, episodes of shows could actually get lost. Film reels would be misplaced, tapes would be recorded over, and sometimes entire episodes would disappear from existence. Decades later, these truly lost episodes became treasures for collectors and fans. Finding a lost episode of a classic show was like discovering buried treasure. Television networks understood this fascination with lost media and sometimes used it for marketing. They would promote regular episodes as lost or never before seen to create excitement and boost ratings. In 2003, SpongeBob SquarePants decided to make fun of this marketing tactic by creating its own fake lost episode. The show promoted an upcoming episode as a long-lost treasure that had been hidden away for years. Fans got excited about seeing this rare special episode. Then, when the episode finally aired, it turned out to be completely ordinary, with nothing special about it at all. The entire thing was a joke about how television networks trick viewers with false promises. The episode in question is called The Sponge Who Could Fly, also known as the SpongeBob SquarePants Lost episode. It aired as part of Season 3 in March 2003. Before the episode premiered, Nickelodeon launched a major marketing campaign promoting it as a lost episode that had been found in the network's archives. Commercials showed fake footage of someone discovering an old VHS tape in a dusty storage room. The promotions claimed this was a SpongeBob episode that had been completed years earlier, but never aired for mysterious reasons. Now, finally, viewers would get to see this rare, precious piece of SpongeBob history. The marketing campaign worked exactly as intended. Fans got excited. Online forums buzzed with speculation about what made this episode so special that it had been hidden away. Was it too scary for kids? Did it contain controversial content? Was it an experimental episode that did not fit the normal format? People marked their calendars and made sure to watch when the lost episode finally premiered. Nickelodeon had successfully created hype and anticipation for what was really just a regular new episode of SpongeBob. When The Sponge Who Could Fly actually aired, Viewers immediately realized they had been tricked, but in the best possible way. The episode itself is framed as a found tape being watched by Patchy the pirate. Patchy is a live-action character played by Tom Kenny, SpongeBob's voice actor. Patchy appears in special SpongeBob episodes as the president of the SpongeBob fan club. He is a human pirate who lives in the real world and loves SpongeBob more than anything. Patchy episodes usually involve him having some kind of adventure in the real world while trying to watch or celebrate SpongeBob. In The Sponge Who Could Fly, the episode begins with Patchy in his house, talking to the camera about how he is searching for the lost SpongeBob episode. He explains that this episode was completed long ago, but mysteriously vanished before it could air on television. Patchy claims to have been searching for years, checking every possible storage location. He dramatically describes his quest as a noble mission to restore lost SpongeBob content to the world. Finally, after all his effort, Patchy announces that he has found the lost episode. He holds up an old VHS tape with a handwritten label. The tape looks worn and damaged, like something that had been sitting in a basement for years. Patchy puts the tape into his VCR, and the show transitions from live action to animation as the lost episode begins playing. But before we get to the main story, we see more fake documentary-style footage. The video quality intentionally looks old and degraded, like it was recorded decades ago. There are tracking lines and visual glitches that VHS tapes would develop over time. The show is making fun of how lost episodes are presented when they are discovered, mimicking the low quality and damaged appearance that real lost media often has. Then the actual episode starts. The story follows SpongeBob wanting to fly. He sees jellyfish floating through the air and wishes he could join them. SpongeBob tries various methods to achieve flight. He builds wings out of different materials. He jumps off tall structures hoping to soar. He studies birds and insects to learn their secrets. Nothing works. All of SpongeBob's attempts at flying end in failure and comedy. The citizens of Bikini Bottom, especially Squidward, mock SpongeBob for his impossible dream. They tell him that sponges cannot fly and he should give up. Despite the discouragement, SpongeBob keeps trying. Eventually, through determination and one final attempt, SpongeBob actually does achieve flight. The method is silly and does not make scientific sense, but this is SpongeBob, where logic does not always apply. SpongeBob flies around Bikini Bottom, amazing everyone who doubted him. He uses his new ability to help people, rescuing citizens who are in trouble and retrieving items that are out of reach. SpongeBob becomes a hero because of his flying powers. However, the citizens of Bikini Bottom quickly become demanding. Now that they know SpongeBob can fly, they want him to use his power for every little task. They call him constantly, asking him to fly up and get things, fly down and retrieve things, fly over and help with minor problems. SpongeBob becomes exhausted from all the requests. His special ability turns into a burden. Everyone expects him to drop everything and fly to help them, no matter how small the problem. SpongeBob realizes that having a unique power comes with responsibilities and pressures he did not anticipate. At the end of the episode, SpongeBob gives up flying. He decides that having this power is not worth the constant demands and loss of freedom. He goes back to being a regular sponge who cannot fly. Life returns to normal. The story ends with SpongeBob happy to be ordinary again. The moral is about being careful what you wish for and understanding that special abilities can create unexpected problems. This episode is completely normal. There is nothing controversial, scary, or unusual about it. The story is typical SpongeBob, with the same kind of humor, animation, and message that any other episode would have. There is no reason this episode would have been hidden away or withheld from broadcast. It is not a lost episode in any real sense. The entire lost episode concept was a marketing gimmick designed to trick viewers into thinking they were seeing something rare and special. The episode does not pretend otherwise. Throughout the story, it cuts back to Patchy watching the tape in his house. Patchy keeps commenting on how amazing it is that this lost episode was finally found. He treats it like a precious artifact, but viewers watching can see that the episode is ordinary. This creates humor through the contrast between Patchy's excitement and the reality of what is being shown. The show is making fun of itself and the way networks overhype normal content. At the end of the episode, after the SpongeBob story finishes, Patchy expresses disappointment. He admits that the lost episode was not as special as he expected. He seems let down by how ordinary it was. This moment is the show directly acknowledging the joke. Patchy represents fans who got excited by the marketing campaign, and his disappointment mirrors what some real viewers probably felt. But instead of being genuinely disappointing, the whole thing is funny because it is so honest about the trick that was played. The concept of lost episodes has a real history in television. In the early days of TV, networks did not always preserve every episode they aired. Tape was expensive, so it was common to record over old tapes to save money. Many episodes from 1950s and 1960s shows were deliberately erased because nobody thought they would have value later. Some episodes were lost in fires, floods, or accidents. For decades, certain episodes of famous shows were completely unavailable because no copies existed anywhere. For example, many early episodes of Doctor Who were lost for years. The BBC recorded over the tapes because storage space was limited and tapes were reusable. Eventually, some of these episodes were found in private collections or foreign television archives. Each discovered episode was a major event for fans. Similarly, early episodes of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson were not saved systematically. Many performances and interviews from the 1960s no longer exist. By the 2000s, when The Sponge Who Could Fly aired, digital technology meant that losing episodes was much less likely. But the cultural fascination with lost media remained. Internet communities formed around searching for lost episodes, movies, and recordings. People shared memories of shows they watched as children but could never find again. The hunt for lost media became a hobby for collectors and archivists. Television networks noticed this interest and started using lost episode marketing to promote regular content. They would claim that an episode was rare, never before seen, or specially locked away. Sometimes these claims had a grain of truth, like an episode that aired once but was not repeated. More often, the claims were exaggerations designed to create excitement. SpongeBob's fake lost episode satirized this practice perfectly. The parody works on multiple levels. First, it makes fun of networks that oversell their content. Nickelodeon was essentially making fun of itself and the entire television industry. Second, it gently mocks fans who get too excited about marketing hype. Patchy represents viewers who believe everything they are told and build up unrealistic expectations. Third, it comments on the nature of special content. What makes an episode lost or special? Usually nothing except the story we tell about it. Some fans were genuinely disappointed when they realized The Sponge Who Could Fly was just a regular episode. They felt tricked by the marketing campaign, but most fans appreciated the joke once they understood what was happening. The episode itself is entertaining and well made. The meta commentary about television marketing adds an extra layer of intelligence to the story. SpongeBob was not just making a joke about other shows. It was willing to joke about itself and its own promotional tactics. The fake lost episode also fits with SpongeBob's tendency towards self-aware humor. As we discussed with the number 11 Easter egg, SpongeBob occasionally breaks the fourth wall and acknowledges that it is a television show. The lost episode concept takes this further by creating an entire marketing campaign that is part of the joke. The humor does not just exist within the episode. It extends to the commercials, the promotion, and the viewer's experience of waiting for and watching the episode. Patchy the Pirate is the perfect character to frame this joke. Patchy is an overly enthusiastic fan who takes SpongeBob too seriously. He represents extreme fandom, the kind of person who would definitely believe in and search for a lost episode. Having Patchy discover the lost tape and then be disappointed by how ordinary it is creates a narrative structure that makes the satire clear. We are not just watching a fake lost episode. We are watching someone react to discovering that the lost episode is not special at all. The VHS tape aesthetic adds authenticity to the parody. In 2003, VHS was still common, but starting to be replaced by DVDs. Many people remembered the way old tapes looked when they degraded over time. The tracking lines, color distortion, and audio problems were familiar to anyone who had watched old home videos or recordings. By mimicking these visual problems, SpongeBob made the fake lost episode feel more believable, at least initially. The Sponge Who Could Fly has become one of the more memorable SpongeBob episodes, not because of the story about SpongeBob learning to fly, but because of the clever way it was marketed and framed. The episode is remembered more for being fake lost media than for its actual content. This is appropriate, given that the whole point was to comment on how marketing and presentation can be more memorable than the actual product being sold. The lost episode concept has influenced how fans think about SpongeBob. Even though The Sponge Who Could Fly proved that lost episodes are marketing tricks, fans still speculate about whether other SpongeBob episodes exist that have never been broadcast. Are there deleted scenes? Are there episodes that were made but never finished? The fascination with hidden content continues even after being exposed as usually meaningless. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While SpongeBob was busy satirizing how television networks market their shows to eager audiences, the animation team was also quietly including tributes to cinema, history, particularly one landmark science fiction film that had captured imaginations decades before SpongeBob even existed. Section 11, 2001, A Space Odyssey. Easter egg. Science fiction movies have shaped how we imagine space travel. From rocket ships to alien encounters, filmmakers have created visions of the future that inspire generations. One movie stands above most others as a masterpiece of science fiction filmmaking. 2001, A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick and released in 1968, changed how movies could look and feel. The film featured groundbreaking special effects, classical music used in unexpected ways, and a mysterious story that people still debate today. More than 30 years after that movie came out, SpongeBob SquarePants paid tribute to it in a Season 1 episode. The reference is quick and subtle, appearing for just a moment in the background of a scene. But for fans who know their movie history, spotting this Easter egg connects SpongeBob to one of the most important films ever made. The Easter egg appears in an episode called Sandy's Rocket from Season 1. This episode aired in 1999 during SpongeBob's first year on television. The story follows SpongeBob visiting Sandy at her tree dome. Sandy is preparing for a mission to the moon in a rocket ship she built herself. SpongeBob is fascinated by the rocket and wants to go on the mission with her. Sandy explains that she is going alone to collect moon rock samples for scientific research. SpongeBob begs to come along, but Sandy refuses. She needs to focus on her work without distractions. That night, SpongeBob cannot stop thinking about the rocket. He decides to sneak into Sandy's tree dome with Patrick to take a quick trip to the moon. The two friends climb into the rocket without permission. They accidentally launch the ship while playing with the controls. SpongeBob and Patrick blast off into space, or at least they think they do. In reality, the rocket only flies a short distance and crashes back into Bikini Bottom. But because everything outside looks dark and crater-filled like the moon's surface, SpongeBob and Patrick believe they have actually reached the moon. The Easter egg occurs during the launch sequence. When the rocket first blasts off, SpongeBob and Patrick experience zero gravity. They float around inside the cabin as the ship accelerates. Objects that were secured inside the rocket come loose and float past them. Sandy had packed various items for her moon mission, and these items drift through the air in the weightless environment. The camera shows SpongeBob and Patrick spinning and tumbling as different objects float by their heads. Among these floating objects is a book. The book is clearly visible for a brief moment as it drifts past the camera. The cover shows the title 2001 in simple text. This is a direct reference to the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey. The book floating in zero gravity mirrors similar scenes from Kubrick's film, which featured objects floating through space. By including this book, the SpongeBob animators acknowledge the influence of one of cinema's greatest science fiction films. But the reference does not stop with just the book. Viewers who pay close attention to the sound design will notice something else. The music playing during this launch sequence has a classical feel to it. The dramatic, sweeping orchestral sound is similar to the music used in 2001, A Space Odyssey. Kubrick famously used classical music pieces in his film, including Also Sprach Zarathustra by Richard Strauss and The Blue Danube by Johann Strauss. Otro. These classical pieces became forever associated with space travel, because of how Kubrick used them in his movie. The SpongeBob episode does not use these exact pieces, likely for copyright reasons, but the musical style during the rocket launch evokes the same feeling, creating an audio Easter egg to match the visual one. To understand why this Easter egg matters, we need to know why 2001: A Space Odyssey is so important. The movie was released in 1968, a year before humans actually landed on the moon. At that time, space travel was brand new and exciting. The United States and Soviet Union were racing to reach space first. People were fascinated by rockets, astronauts, and the possibility of exploring beyond Earth. Many science fiction movies from this era looked cheap and silly, with obvious special effects and unrealistic props. Stanley Kubrick wanted to make a science fiction film that looked real and believable. Kubrick worked with science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke to create the story. They consulted with scientists and engineers to make sure everything looked accurate. The spaceship designs, the space station, the way characters moved in zero gravity, all of it was based on real science and realistic predictions of future technology. When the movie came out, audiences were amazed by how real it looked. Some scenes were so convincing that conspiracy theorists later claimed NASA hired Kubrick to fake the moon landing because his special effects were so good. The plot of 2001: A Space Odyssey is strange and mysterious. The movie has very little dialogue. Long stretches pass with no talking, just images and music. The story involves a mysterious black monolith that appears at different times in human history. The monolith seems to push human evolution forward. In the future sections of the film, astronauts travel to Jupiter to investigate another monolith. The ship's computer, HAL 9000, malfunctions and kills most of the crew. The surviving astronaut reaches Jupiter and experiences something beyond human understanding. The ending is confusing and open to interpretation. People have debated what it means for over 50 years. Despite or perhaps because of its strangeness, 2001: A Space Odyssey became one of the most influential movies ever made. It won an Academy Award for special effects. It influenced every science fiction film that came after it. Star Wars, Alien, Interstellar, Gravity, and countless other space movies borrowed ideas, visual styles, or techniques from Kubrick's film. The image of the black monolith became iconic. HAL 9000's calm, creepy voice saying, "I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that," became one of cinema's most famous lines. The movie also changed how filmmakers used music. Before 2001, most movies had original scores composed specifically for them. Kubrick instead chose existing classical music pieces and paired them with his images. The combination of beautiful classical music with stunning space visuals created an emotional impact that original compositions might not have achieved. The opening scene, with the sun rising over Earth while also Sprach Zarathustra plays, is one of the most famous moments in film history. By referencing 2001: A Space Odyssey in Sandy's rocket, SpongeBob connects itself to this rich cinematic history. The show demonstrates awareness of and respect for the films that came before it. SpongeBob might be a silly cartoon about a talking sponge, but its creators appreciated serious filmmaking and wanted to honor it. The floating book Easter egg works perfectly for several reasons. First, it fits naturally into the scene. Sandy would realistically bring reading material on a space mission. Astronauts on the International Space Station today bring books to read during downtime. Having a book float by in zero gravity makes logical sense within the story. Second, the title 2001 is simple and clear. Viewers who know the movie will immediately recognize the reference. The title does not need explanation or context. Third, the Easter egg does not interrupt the story or draw attention away from SpongeBob and Patrick's adventure. It exists in the background for those who notice it, without bothering those who do not. Finding this Easter egg requires paying close attention. The book appears on screen for only a second or two. It is not the focus of the shot. Viewers watching the episode for the first time are probably watching SpongeBob and Patrick react to weightlessness, not studying the floating objects carefully. This is what separates a good Easter egg from a bad one. A good Easter egg hides in plain sight, rewarding careful viewers without punishing casual ones. You can enjoy Sandy's rocket without ever noticing the 2001 book. But if you do notice it, the episode becomes richer and more interesting. The Easter egg also works because it is appropriate for SpongeBob's humor. The show often includes references that work on multiple levels. Kids enjoy the physical comedy and silly voices. Adults appreciate the cultural references and clever writing. A child watching Sandy's rocket might never have heard of 2001, A Space Odyssey, and does not need to know about it to laugh at SpongeBob and Patrick bumbling around in zero gravity. An adult or older teenager watching the same episode might spot the reference and feel smart for catching it. The show serves both audiences simultaneously without compromising either experience. Multiple fans and Easter egg tracking websites have confirmed this reference over the years. People watching Sandy's rocket noticed the book and recognized the title. They posted about it on forums and wikis dedicated to cataloging Easter eggs from various shows. The reference has been documented and verified by enough independent sources that we can be confident it is intentional and not just viewers seeing patterns that do not exist. Some Easter eggs are debatable. Maybe something that looks like a reference is actually a coincidence. Maybe fans are reading too much into an accidental similarity. But the 2001 book in Sandy's rocket is too specific to be coincidence. The animators had to deliberately draw that book with that title on the cover. They chose to include it during a space travel scene with classical-style music playing. The references all point in the same direction, toward Kubrick's film. The inclusion of this Easter egg tells us something about the people who made early SpongeBob episodes. They were not just creating simple kids' entertainment. They were film fans, art appreciators, and pop culture experts who wanted to fill their show with layers of meaning. They respected their audience enough to include sophisticated references. They trusted that some viewers would appreciate the effort, even if most people never noticed. Sandy's rocket itself is a clever episode that plays with the difference between perception and reality. SpongeBob and Patrick think they have traveled to the moon, but they are actually still in Bikini Bottom. Everything they experience is misinterpreted. This theme connects to 2001, A Space Odyssey, in interesting ways. Kubrick's film is also about perception and reality, about humans encountering things beyond their understanding. The connection between the two works goes deeper than just the surface-level reference to space travel. The Easter egg represents the kind of care and thought that went into early SpongeBob episodes. Every frame was considered, every detail was intentional. The show did not just throw random jokes and images on screen. It built a complete world with internal consistency and external references. This attention to detail is part of why SpongeBob succeeded so dramatically and lasted so long. Viewers could watch episodes multiple times and discover new things with each viewing. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. While the show was paying tribute to Stanley Kubrick's vision of space and the future, it was simultaneously building connections to something much older and more grounded, using the past to explain where Bikini Bottom itself actually exists in the real world. Section 12. Bikini Bottom's real-world location. Every fictional place needs to exist somewhere, even if that somewhere is imaginary. Writers must decide whether their fantasy worlds connect to reality or exist completely separately. Middle-earth from Lord of the Rings exists in its own universe, with no connection to Earth. Gotham City from Batman exists in America, but is a made-up city. Bikini Bottom from SpongeBob SquarePants takes a different approach. It exists in a real location in our actual world, positioned directly beneath a real place that you could visit if you wanted to. But the real location that Bikini Bottom sits under has a dark and complicated history involving war, nuclear weapons, and displacement of people from their homes. This creates one of the most interesting and darkest Easter eggs in the entire show. An Easter egg that explains not just where Bikini Bottom is located, but possibly why its residents can talk, walk, and behave like humans. The name Bikini Bottom itself contains a clue. The word bikini is not just a type of swimsuit. It is also the name of an atoll in the Pacific Ocean. An atoll is a ring-shaped coral reef, or a series of small islands arranged in a circle around a lagoon. Bikini Atoll is part of the Marshall Islands, a group of islands and atolls located in the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and the Philippines. The Marshall Islands are beautiful, remote, and historically significant for reasons both wonderful and terrible. Bikini Atoll has been inhabited for thousands of years by the Marshallese people. They lived on the islands, fished in the waters, and built communities generation after generation. The atoll was peaceful and isolated, far from major shipping routes or important political centers. But in 1946, shortly after World War II ended, the United States government decided to use Bikini Atoll for something that would change it forever. The U.S. military wanted to test nuclear weapons to understand how powerful they were and what effects they had. They needed a remote location far from major populations where massive explosions would not endanger American citizens. Bikini Atoll was chosen. The U.S. government asked the Marshallese people living on Bikini Atoll to leave their homes temporarily so the testing could happen. The residents were told they could return after the tests were finished. They reluctantly agreed, believing they would be gone for a short time. In 1946, 167 Bikini Atoll residents were relocated to other islands. They took very few possessions with them because they expected to return soon, but they never came back. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States conducted 67 nuclear weapons tests at Bikini Atoll. These were not small explosions. These were some of the most powerful weapons ever created, including hydrogen bombs that were hundreds of times stronger than the atomic bombs dropped on Japan during World War II. The test destroyed the environment of Bikini Atoll. The explosions vaporized islands, left massive craters in the ocean floor, and contaminated the entire area with dangerous radiation. The radiation made the atoll unsafe for human habitation. Even decades later, the radiation levels remained too high for people to live there safely. The Marshallese people, who were forced to leave, have never been able to return home. Their islands, their fishing grounds, their ancestral lands are all gone or poisoned. This is a tragedy that affected real people and continues to affect their descendants today. So what does this have to do with SpongeBob SquarePants? Steven Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob, deliberately chose to set his show in Bikini Bottom as a reference to Bikini Atoll. He confirmed this in interviews before his death in 2018. The connection is not hidden or debatable. It is intentional and official. The fictional city of Bikini Bottom sits on the ocean floor directly beneath where Bikini Atoll exists on the surface. When you watch SpongeBob, you are watching a show set at the site of nuclear weapons testing. Several pieces of evidence in the show support this connection. The opening sequence of every SpongeBob episode begins with a narrator speaking in a French accent. This narrator, voiced by Tom Kenny, describes the setting. He often says things like, "Ah, the Pacific Ocean," or mentions specific oceanic locations. The Pacific Ocean is where Bikini Atoll is located. The narrator is telling us exactly where we are, even though most viewers never think about it carefully. The opening credits also show an underwater view that transitions to a view of an island above the water. This island, with its tropical appearance, represents Bikini Atoll. The camera then dives back underwater to show us Bikini Bottom. The show is explicitly connecting the underwater city to the real-world location above it. Every single episode begins with this reminder, hiding in plain sight. The connection to nuclear testing creates interesting possibilities for explaining the show's premise. In the real world, sea creatures do not talk, wear clothes, live in houses, or work at restaurants. But in SpongeBob, all of these impossible things happen. Why? One popular fan theory suggests that the nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll caused mutations in the sea creatures living there. The radiation changed them, giving them intelligence, the ability to speak, and human-like behavior. This would explain why Bikini Bottom is so different from the normal ocean. This theory is dark and disturbing when you think about it. Nuclear radiation in real life causes cancer, birth defects, and death. It destroys environments and makes places unlivable. The idea that radiation created SpongeBob and his friends means they are the result of horrific weapons tests that destroyed the homes and lives of real people. But SpongeBob never addresses this darkness directly. The show is cheerful, colorful, and fun. It does not dwell on the implications of its setting. The nuclear connection exists in the background, affecting the world, but never discussed by the characters. Steven Hillenburg was a marine biologist before he became an animator. He studied ocean life and cared deeply about marine environments. Choosing to set SpongeBob at a nuclear testing site was probably his way of acknowledging both the wonder of ocean life and the damage humans have done to the oceans. The show celebrates sea creatures while being set at a place that represents environmental destruction. This creates a complicated relationship between the show and its setting. Some fans argue that the nuclear mutation theory goes too far. They say SpongeBob is just a silly cartoon where animals talk because it is funny, not because of radiation. They point out that many cartoons feature talking animals without needing scientific explanations. Mickey Mouse talks, but nobody thinks radiation caused it. Bugs Bunny is intelligent without nuclear testing being involved. Why does SpongeBob need a dark explanation when other shows do not? These fans have a point. SpongeBob can be enjoyed without thinking about nuclear weapons or radiation. Children watching the show are not worried about the real history of Bikini Atoll. They are laughing at Patrick being dumb and SpongeBob's silly laugh. The show works perfectly well as simple entertainment. But for older viewers and adults, the Bikini Atoll connection adds depth and meaning. It transforms SpongeBob from just a kid's show into something more thoughtful and layered. The real Bikini Atoll is still dangerous today. Scientists monitor radiation levels and study the effects of the nuclear tests. Some marine life has returned to the area, but the ecosystem will never fully recover. The Marshallese people continue to fight for compensation and justice for what was done to their homeland. Their story is important and should be remembered. By connecting SpongeBob to Bikini Atoll, even indirectly, the show ensures that millions of people around the world at least hear the name Bikini Atoll. Maybe some of them will learn the real history and understand what happened there. The French narrator in SpongeBob serves as a constant reminder of this location. His accent and formal way of speaking create a documentary feeling, as if we are watching a nature program about real ocean environments. This narrator occasionally makes references to the Pacific Ocean or specific geographic features. These mentions are brief and easy to miss, but they consistently place Bikini Bottom in the real world rather than a fantasy universe. The opening credits, which show real underwater footage mixed with animation, reinforce this connection. Real fish swim past the camera. Real coral and seaweed appear on screen. Then we transition to the animated world where SpongeBob lives. The show is telling us that Bikini Bottom exists in the same ocean where real creatures live. It is not a separate dimension or a made-up place. It is our ocean, our world, with cartoon characters added to it. Steven Hillenburg's choice to use Bikini Bottom as the setting shows his sophistication as a creator. He could have invented a completely fictional location with a made-up name. Many cartoons do this. He could have called it Coral City, or Seaweed Springs, or any other ocean-themed name. But by choosing Bikini Bottom and connecting it to Bikini Atoll, he grounded his fantasy world in reality. He gave the show a foundation that connects to real history, real geography, and real consequences of human actions. This Easter egg is different from all the others we have discussed. Finding Nosferatu in Graveyard Shift is fun and random. Spotting Fred yelling about his leg is funny and rewarding. Noticing the 2001 book in Sandy's rocket connects the show to film history. But discovering that Bikini Bottom sits on top of a nuclear testing site is sobering and complicated. It makes you think about real-world issues while watching a cartoon about a talking sponge. It adds weight and meaning to something that could have been purely silly. Some viewers prefer not to think about the Bikini Atoll connection. They want SpongeBob to be simple fun without complicated real-world baggage. That is a valid way to watch the show. The beauty of Easter eggs is that they are optional. You can ignore them and still enjoy the content. But for viewers who want deeper meaning, who appreciate layers and complexity, who like discovering hidden connections, the Bikini Atoll setting provides endless food for thought. The Easter eggs scattered throughout SpongeBob SquarePants transform a simple cartoon into something richer and more complex. From random vampire cameos to improvised family members, from carefully planned number jokes to dark historical references, these hidden details reward attention and curiosity. They prove that children's entertainment can be intelligent without being boring, sophisticated without being pretentious, and meaningful without being preachy. SpongeBob respects its audience by including details that not everyone will notice, but that enhance the experience for those who do. These Easter eggs ensure that even after watching hundreds of episodes, fans can still discover something new, still make unexpected connections, and still find reasons to appreciate the care and creativity that went into building Bikini Bottom. Conclusion: SpongeBob SquarePants has been hiding secrets in plain sight for over 25 years. From Nosferatu flicking light switches to Fred screaming about his leg, from the show's original name SpongeBob to Hawaiian music playing in every episode, these Easter eggs reveal the incredible care and creativity behind Bikini Bottom. The animators included famous paintings in Squidward's house. The writers scattered callbacks to classic episodes throughout later seasons. Voice actors improvised lines that became permanent parts of the show's history. Even the location of Bikini Bottom itself tells a story that connects a cheerful cartoon to serious real-world history. These hidden details serve an important purpose. They reward longtime fans who pay attention. They add layers of meaning that make rewatching episodes worthwhile. They prove that cartoons for children can be intelligent and sophisticated without talking down to their audience. SpongeBob respects viewers of all ages by including jokes and references that work on multiple levels. Not every viewer will catch every Easter egg. Most people watching SpongeBob will never notice Tom Kenny's face on the volcano sauce bottle or spot the 2001 book floating in Sandy's rocket. But that is exactly what makes these Easter eggs special. They exist for those who look carefully, who stay curious, who want to discover the secrets hidden in their favorite show. SpongeBob's Easter eggs prove that great entertainment rewards both casual enjoyment and dedicated attention, making Bikini Bottom a place where there is always something new to discover, no matter how many times you visit.